Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the Silmarillion Film Project. This is session number 1 of season 7, mostly. It is, except we're not going to actually do season 7 tonight. Or, well, we are. Tonight, we're looking ahead. That's what's happening tonight. It is time to pause. We have come to a major milestone, which is the end of the Beren and Luthien story. And so now we're kind of looking, over the brow of the hill towards the long descent towards the War of Wrath. And as we've been so excited to think and talk about this that we kept digressing into this discussion here and there during the second half of last season and kept having to stop ourselves. So tonight we get to indulge ourselves fully in thinking about how we're going to do the road ahead. Because one of the ways in which the stuff is coming ahead is really interesting is how are we going to handle the narratives which begin to segment and get a little bit complicated. So the goal tonight is to think through and map out roughly between here and the War of Wrath, how we're going to plan to do this, what exactly we're going to include in season 7. Okay, I don't think season 7 is actually that controversial. It's after season 7 that's going to get more complicated. But anyway, yeah, we're gonna be talking about all that. So big picture story planning here tonight. Before we get started, though, this week is a big week. Not only because I started the Till We Have Faces discussion in Mythgard Academy last night, and not only because we're starting season 7 of the Silm Film Project tonight, but also because this weekend is the beginning of our regional moots for the fall. So we are, I'm going to Portland, Oregon for Cascade Moot. Tomorrow, I'll be getting on the plane tomorrow. So this weekend is Cascade Moot in Portland, Oregon. You can still join us, and you can certainly still join us in a remote fashion. All of our moots are fully hybrid, and so you're always welcome to join us remotely at any of our moots. And people who join us remotely, as well as people who join us on site, are given recordings of the sessions as well. So even if you want to join remotely and can't make the whole day, you can come in anyway. Can't wait for Cascade Moot. Been looking forward to getting to the Pacific Northwest for a long time. We're finally doing that. 2 coming up in October, Middle Moot in Iowa and New England Moot here in New Hampshire. And then back to Denver for our second ever Mountain Moot on November 4th. And then down to New Orleans, Louisiana for Bayou Moot, our very first trip to New Orleans. So it's our second totally new moot this fall. Really fun. Back to Sunshine Moot in Orlando, Florida in February. And of course, Osmoot, the second international moot, our second Australian moot down at the end of January, which is going to be in Sydney, Australia this time. So we were in Brisbane last time. We're going to be down in Sydney this time. And that's going to be in the middle of the summer, January 26th through 28th. 2024. So there's more also coming up. We're looking into several other things for the spring, confirming sort of the spring calendar here as we go, but a very eventful fall as we move forward. So that's going to be marvelous fun. All right. So we had a pretty good grip on the first 5 season arcs, right? We ended up, well, the plan anyway was 5 seasons. Then y'all twisted my arms and were like, because, Nick and Marie were both really heavily in the camp of, they're like, look, Of Beleriand and its realms is too action-packed. It's too exciting. We need a whole season just devoted to Of Beleriand and its realms. So I was like, yeah, it has to happen.
And we did.
And we did. And we did. Yeah.
It may be more accurate to say that the issue arose that men die real fast. And that was a large chunk of time. So we were having struggles figuring out how to have characters on screen for more than one episode if they were mortal. Yeah. And the idea of having a character such as Haleth only appear in a single episode seemed like the wrong choice for our show.
Yeah.
In an alternate universe, somewhere out there, Film was made with only 5 seasons, including Baron and Luthien, and it was probably still awesome because it would have given us the actual experience that the elves were having, and that would have been entertaining and interesting.
Right.
But we would have lost a few things along the way, and
yeah, agreed.
And it wasn't just of Beleriand and its realms. It was, the 5 chapters after that as well.
Well, I know, but come on, you have to admit that joke is pretty funny.
It is. It's a good one, and so I was going to let you have it.
And it's not entirely wrong. I mean, it was mostly of Beleriand and its realms.
Sure.
Yeah.
A little bit about Eöl and Eredil, and maybe of the coming of men into Beleriand, things like that.
Yeah.
But it allowed us to spend time in each of those realms rather than just saying, okay, and some things happened, and here's all the stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
The documentary version, much easier.
Oh, yeah. Man, the documentary version is going to be fantastic.
I wonder if somebody's working on that.
Me too. I hope they would get with it. All right. So time for a new plan. All right. We need to make the second half of the plan here and figure out what we're doing. So, okay. Season 7 is pretty easy, right? We know the one bit we kind of skipped over already was the disappearance of Túrin and Tuor. So we already talked about this, that we were thinking episode 1 is Túrin and Tuor, being whisked into Gondolin, their time in Gondolin, so how many episodes we spend, we'll talk about that later. But, so we begin with Túrin and Tuor in Gondolin, and then we end the season with, Aure and Tulava, basically, with Túrin at the Fens of Serech. I mean, I think that's, and I'm not saying that exact moment has to be the closing end of but that,
But, yeah. I think that if you say this season is about the Nirnaeth, that's fair, but it feels weird because it's not going to be a whole season about one battle. So, not that the Nirnaeth is a single battle, but still, it's, yeah. So saying that this is the season about Túrin and Tuor is different. They have a whole story that we're going to tell. And obviously that culminates in the Fens of Serech.
Right, exactly. So this not only means that this, again, it's fairly intuitive what the scope of the season will be. And I love how this shape really kind of emphasizes the, we're going to be getting Gondolin at the beginning and the end, and that kind of connection with Túrin and Tuor there with God, so that's a sort of nice as we're going through there. But also it seems pretty clear. We've had for the last few seasons a clear sort of central protagonist point of view character. And this one is pretty obvious, right? I mean, Túrin is our central protagonist for season 7. So season 7 is okay. I'm not gonna say it's easy, but a lot of these basic parameters really kind of suggest themselves, I think, without too very much discussion. There'll be a lot of things that'll be fun to elaborate, right? A lot of things that'll be fun to add. What other things were you guys thinking about there?
Well, I would say that the biggest question is going to be where exactly we end. Like, that's really going to be the big question.
Like what the final scene will be, like the closing scene. Yeah. Yep. Agreed. Uh-oh. I seem to have lost people. Oh dear. I wonder what happened. Oh, there we go. Uh-oh. So, question, can you guys still hear me? Oh dear. All right. Okay. Looks like we had a Zoom problem. All right, hang on. Yeah, you can still hear me because I'm coming through on my mic, which is not connected to Zoom. You can't see me, but you can hear me. I could pop up. Hello, I'm here. All right, hang on a second. Zoom is failing me. Oh. Hey, it just reappeared. I didn't even restart it.
You're muted.
You're muted.
It just reappeared. That was super. I've never even seen that. I've been using Zoom for years now. I tried to shut it down and it just popped back up again. So weird.
You're
Oh, sorry, I'm doubled. Yeah.
Doubled, I was gonna say.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we took over while you were gone, and
and talked to nobody.
Okay. I was gonna say, what did you took over while I was gone, and then planned the rest of the thing, and I'm like, oh wait, didn't that
we're
kind
all
of
done.
already happen?
We're completely done.
It's all good. It's all good. Okay. All right. Sorry for that brief interruption. So what I was saying was, in addition, Nick, you were saying some other things that'll be interesting to include, and other. You had just started to say exactly where it ends is going to be one of the really interesting things.
Right. So, for example, we can have it end at Hurin's capture, right? And if Hurin's our focus point, that kind of seems like the end of the season. Maybe some extra stuff to kind of like point towards the next season.
Closing scenes,
But the drama ends there. If he's our big focus point. You could show him getting dragged into Angband and thrown up on the in the chair and whatnot. But that doesn't feel like.
No, I'm not feeling that either. I think that seems to me like the beginning of, basically what Christopher did in Children of Hurin, right? It seems like the beginning of the Túrin story rather than the end of the story.
Precisely.
Yeah, the curse is really Túrin's thing.
It is.
Hurin lives it out.
It's Hurin's problem too, but it's
it's the next chapter.
Yep.
So I agree with that. There are a lot of the questions that we'll have to say, is this in? Is that in? Once we get to the end there. For instance, the Hill of Slain, will that be shown at the end of this season in some kind of shot just to see
that
it for the effects?
Yeah.
And then we deal with it later to tell the story there. Will we go to other storylines to see the end of something, maybe depending on where we are with things? Like, we have a few things to work out.
And our Hill the Slain,
don't we? But
we don't have to include it in this season. We have to include it in the show. There's places to work it in later if we so choose.
If you just want to make it the beginning of the Tuor story, for instance.
For instance,
yes,
especially if the Tuor story is told with any remove from that battle. We're going to need that flashback to her to understand what's even going on with Tuor. So depending on choices we make tonight, that might influence where we place Rian at the end of her story.
And of course, our Hill of the Slain is actually going to include slain.
Not just helmets?
Not just helmets. We're not going to shy away from actual dead bodies.
I knew. I thought that might be just where you were headed there. Yep, I agreed. The grass will grow better on a hill made of actual dead bodies rather than a hill made of helmets.
It's hard to grow grass on steel.
Helmets. Yeah, it is.
Classically.
Famously. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Anyway, so we'll see.
So we'll have other smaller storylines that we'll have to develop for this season that we haven't yet, such as what is going on with Sauron and the Easterlings, what is going on with Galadriel. Like, we'll have to plan some things there. So depending on those stories, we may have something to do with the last episode as well.
Yeah, but one thing
within the scope.
Yeah. One thing I'd throw in here, by the way, we've been pretty restrained, all things considered, with Galadriel since the end of season 4, right? We got her married off, and we've given her and Celeborn a nice long honeymoon here. I know she came in a couple places.
Isn't that what fictional women? Isn't that the end of their story when they get married off?
When they get married,
works?
yeah, that's how
it
it's supposed
depends
to work,
whether it's a French novel or an English novel.
Yes, right. Okay.
Just so you know.
Okay.
Yeah. She's done what she's supposed to do, though. Like, that's her job.
Right.
In an English novel, sure.
Anyway, not that sorry, there's really no point in trying to keep Nick from running himself into trouble, but
nobody's trying to goad Marie into a tirade of any kind.
The point is,
you're gonna get a different tirade than you asked for, I think. So be careful.
The point is, we brought Galadriel into like the story of the arrival of the the Estelades and all of them, right? But we've been relatively restrained. We connected her with Luthien, and but we brought her in for the one episode. She came to the wedding and all that kind of thing. So we've not left her behind. We've not forgotten about her entirely, but we haven't yet.
A season is a very small role.
Very small sample. And basically it has meant that so far in the last 2 seasons, 5 and 6, last 2 seasons, we have basically avoided the question in the rest of the story of the First Age. How is Galadriel going to be involved? What is her, because there's going to need to be, unless our answer is going to be she goes over the mountains and ceases to be involved in Beleriand at all. Basically, unless we do that, we're going to need to work her pretty significantly. Think about how to work her pretty significantly into the events that are upcoming. And if we choose not to do that, then we can't just leave her behind, and we got to figure out a way to involve her story on the eastern side of the mountains. So that certainly seems to be something that we're not going to... Season 7 is beginning to feel... I didn't feel the lack of her in the last 2 seasons. Again, we involved her and in some small ways, and I did, but I'm coming to the point now where I'm feeling like if we don't get more Galadriel, we're gonna we're gonna kind of lose track of her as a character. Right. So,
and we have choices to make now about when she's gonna go east and what is her connection to the story with the rest of Doriath. Because obviously Doriath's storyline is not going to survive the First Age. Right. So we have to have some choices and some intentions there before we go too much further, which is why I'm happy that we're doing this planning episode now, because technically we could wait a whole season, right? We have 7 more or less scoped out, so we could get through 7 before we said, and what are we doing with the rest? But I wanted to know what we're doing with the rest. Yeah. So that would influence any choices we make when we plan out 7.
And of course, to some extent, I mean, I don't want to overdo it because I never do that. But if we're going to have to think about Galadriel's ultimate trajectory here. I mean, there's we should even be thinking about what is her trajectory going to be into the Second Age. And I'm thinking, of course, of the multiple versions of the Galadriel story that Tolkien was developing, what her role exactly is in, relationship to Eriador in the Second Age and the founding of, Lothlorien. And there are a bunch of different versions of that story with her more and less involved. And again, I think we need to be... I feel like season 7 is the season where we need to begin her on her trajectory. And so we're going to have what may seem like a very forward thinking discussion about Galadriel, because I think we're just going to need that.
So the other thing that we need to remember is that we kind of need to backslide her a bit.
Right.
And
for sure.
But I mean, of course, season 6 kind of allowed us to at least slow her down in her character growth. But I kind of feel like she needs to do something pretty bad in order for us to get back to a point where it's going to make sense for her to grow over the Second Age.
Yep. Absolutely. Are there other of these kinds of storylines that we want to be thinking of in season 7? I hesitate to say that because it's not like I think we necessarily need to make Galadriel the big... Oh, wait, hang on. Yeah, there is already, obviously. Sauron. It's time for us to start answering the Sauron question.
Yeah,
right.
both those questions take us to the end of the first age and beyond, which is why we should consider the whole trajectory and not just answer those questions for season 7. So as we discuss their storylines in season 7, it should be, and looking forward to 8, 9, 10, 11, however many seasons we want to have in the first stage, which is maybe something we should figure out.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah.
And you know what? Maybe a conflict between Galadriel and Sauron may not be the world's worst thing to start off the second age, and it could be a place where Sauron essentially traps her into doing something like pretty close to being evil. That's kind of his go-to move.
Yeah. I mean, this is I blame you guys, but this was a struggle I had throughout the Rings of Power discussion, right? People would be like, "Oh, this Galadriel story doesn't make sense." And I'm like, actually, it seems almost inescapable, actually, from the point. I mean, that is to choose Galadriel and Sauron as the two main through line antagonists, because they're the two that come through. I mean, like,
why would you not do that?
Why would you not do that? It's perfectly logical. So, when it's why I've never. I mean, there are lots of other reasons why I haven't been able to enter into the general spirit of Scorn, which the Rings of Power storyline was treated well before it was released. But I mean, even afterwards, I've not been able to, there are criticisms to make, but in my opinion, that's not one of them. Nor is like Galadriel looking for vengeance. Like, okay, yeah, seems logical, actually, yeah.
And if we had the foresight to think of that first, that totally could have been her motivation moving forward. There is absolutely zero reason to not think that Galadriel wouldn't be a little bit aggravated at the death of Finrod and be totally willing to hunt down a disappeared Sauron at this point.
Yes. Especially since Sauron has the way that fits into the dynamic. If Sauron is going to go east, which we're pretty sure he's going east, that somebody in Beleriand would A, notice that, and B, say, you know what, maybe somebody ought to go see what he's doing out in the east, and maybe try to interfere with him messing up the rest of the continent while everybody's focused over here. Not
maybe somebody who isn't going to be in the story,
right? Without having
Valerian.
Without our having to add an entire plot line of, like, to answer questions like, what was Galadriel's role in the Battle of Unnumbered Tears? What was Galadriel's role in the fall of Doriath? Right? What was Galadriel's role at the Havens of Sirion? Right? I mean, like, those questions have to be answered if we're going to keep her there.
Right.
We've got a whole lot of figuring out to do and a whole lot of new story to be, and it's going to have a massive ripple effect on all of those stories if we add Galadriel to them, as we would have to. She survives, right? So yeah. No, I mean,
her survival is why we probably shouldn't put her in Doriath when it's getting sacked.
Right.
But
it's a pretty good reason not to be in Doriath that day. Yes.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, some elves do survive, so she could be among the survivors. Like, we could do that storyline as well. But we would have to very much think it through and have a plan.
Yeah.
And not just be like, oh, right, Galadriel, she's there too.
Right. And I would add, by the way, Nick, I don't feel the same compulsion that you do to avoid that because they did it. And here's why. Here's the number one reason why. The number one reason is that we already anticipated them. Like, we can prove that come on. We did PTSD Galadriel before they did. We're fine. We have established our
We didn't
seniority.
do Vengeance Galadriel yet. But we also hadn't killed Finrod in the story until season 6.
In our defense, yes.
Yeah,
no, so
she didn't really have a reason to be vengeful until all 3 of her brothers got killed.
Right. I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm just spitballing here, but I don't think we have her leading squads of elves into the northern reaches to try to find where Sauron was. Since I'm pretty sure the trajectory of our story is likely to be quite different from the Rings of Power trajectory, the mere fact that one of her motivations is vengeance for her brother, like or at least one of the, even to put it a different way, one of the temptations that she struggles against is the desire for vengeance for Finrod. I don't see any reason that we need to avoid that at all. Again, I don't think it's going to be hard to avoid crossover.
Yeah. And we're not going to get to the Second Age until Rings of Power has finished their storyline. So we'll get to pick and choose what we like, dislike from that adaptation, just as we will be able to pick and choose what we like or dislike from Peter Jackson's adaptation when we get to Lord of the Rings.
Exactly.
Because we apparently have all the rights. Not just the rights to the source material, but also the rights to the Peter Jackson films and Rings of Power.
That was our premise.
About a theoretical adaptation, man. We can do anything we want.
Whatever we want.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Feel a little bit like Captain Kirk standing under the grain thing, the granary with the tribbles falling down.
The tribbles falling down, yeah.
I feel a little bit like that right now.
Yeah. I kind of saying we may also end up with the right to remain silent too.
Yeah,
but I think
a few people on Twitch are theorizing about that right now.
When we're going to get a cease and desist. Well, as long as we're not doing anything, and I think we've established we're not.
We have the right to talk about doing things. We get exactly. No problem.
Yeah.
No problem.
The chances of us putting anything on film.
Oh, remote. Yeah. Unfortunately, we have just no resources whatsoever to do that sort of thing. But moving right along. And it's funny because I would have said that without the faintest whiff of irony 5 years ago. But anyway, okay. So Galadriel and Sauron both are two of the other big, outside that central story of the Nir Naithor-Noediad and Húrin and Huor and the road from the visit to Gondolin through to the Fens of Serech. That I think is those two storylines. Sauron's and Galadriel's are two of the big ones. Other things we should be thinking of. I'm doing this not to delay moving on to the future seasons, but because I want to make sure we have this in mind before we do that.
Yeah, that's the main ones. Obviously, at some point we might want to consider if Morgoth's story through the end of the age does what we wanted to do with him. But I think it's been clear in some film for a while that he's lost any creativity he once had. Yeah. So his plans usually are just like crush people, outlast them. It's like, so he's not really doing anything other than being the most powerful being in all of Arda.
And it's funny because of course here we confront sort of a classic problem, right? That like he is becoming. This is the same as true of Sauron in the Third Age. The further he gets down the road to, degradation, the more boring of a character he becomes. He's completely uninteresting. He was an interesting character in season 1. He just sits on his throne and broods and plots to kill people, and conquer things.
So I don't really think there's much to plan there. And at some point we might want to consider other characters who will survive into the Second Age, such as Gil-galad or Celebrimbor. But the two main ones are Sauron and Galadriel, and then other storylines are going to be more minor things like, what are we doing with the dwarves this season, or that kind of thing. And obviously there's going to be dwarves the whole way through, just different dwarves because of lifespans.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's great. Okay, so peeking ahead then. Well, not peeking. Gazing resolutely ahead here. So the remaining chapters are of Túrin and Tuor, of the Ruin of Doriath, of Tuor and the Fall of Gondolin, and of the Voyage of Eärendil and the War of Wrath. That's the sort of what seems to be the obvious natural approach to moving forward. I mean, it's easy to imagine like one season per for each one of those four things, right? That would be very intuitive.
Right. And that's why I put that as the first choice of how to do this.
Right.
So in I think 2 more slides, we'll get to it. But the the let's just follow the order in the book and use that as the scope for each season. There's a reason to do that. One, it obviously worked in the original story, but there's also some reasons to consider other options. And one is that the published Silmarillion is not concerned with chronology.
Yes.
It tells stories in whatever order it wants to, which I guess is whatever order Tolkien wanted to, but
in the order in which they become important, I think is the
meaning you can say this has been going on for 1,000 years, or like let's step back in time and catch you up on this thing and then continue the story. So you'll see in the order here that we've got the story of Tuor in what would become if Turin is in the season 8 storyline, right? Tuor will be the 10th season, but Tuor is born at the end of the Nirnaeth,
right?
So he's only a little younger than his cousin Turin, and they do of course cross paths at one point in their lives. So the crossing paths happens in both stories, but we would have one occurrence in season 8 and one occurrence in season 10, which would mean there's going to be a lot of flashback to get the audience to know what's happening when, and that flashback might make the story a little clunkier on film than it does while reading it, where you can be like, yes, as you recall, Turin, his cousin, we remember that story that was only 2 chapters ago, which is different than you remember that guy from 2 seasons ago, 2 years ago. It's a different feel.
Exactly, it is. And I mean, you can see even in the published book, there are costs of this choice, right? I mean, you can see the logic behind this kind of structure, right? We go straight from the Nirnaeth and the capture of Hurin to the curse on the children of Hurin and the Túrin and Tuor story, right? Which leads directly through Hurin's release and the highly truncated wanderings of Hurin to the Nauglamir and the ruin of Doriath, ultimately, right? But of course, we want to do the story of Tuor and the fall of Gondolin, but we want to connect that with that's the segue to Eärendil, right? So we want to go back. So you can see why he wanted to juxtapose that with the Voyage of Eärendil, right? That from a narrative perspective, like with those two sort of narrative threads, which then finally come together at the Voyage of Eärendil and at the Havens of Sirion, basically at the end, that all makes sense. But there are costs to it, and one of the costs is what you guys were already alluding to about the question of where to include the death of Rian. We were talking about that. That the beginning of the Tuor story always feels, it is only 2 chapters back, as you say, but it feels like miles and miles away from the Nirnaeth or Noidiad. Like, it doesn't feel like this is the immediate aftermath of the Nirnaeth. As readers, we've been coping with the post Nirnaeth world for a long time by then, and it doesn't feel the same.
Right. And I think that pacing is going to be very clear in a visual format, and that an audience is not going to accept let's pretend you don't know anything that happened in the past season, and we'll just start from that battle again and tell a totally different story. You can do that. Like, you can have a pivot point where you tell one branch and then you come back and you tell the other branch. You can do that on film, and it can work. But it's something you're asking the audience to go on that journey with you.
The biggest problem that we face that Tolkien did not face in this is that we kind of have to tell the audience what's happening with our other characters that they've come to know over previous seasons. We can't forget about the Feanorians and the right?
Marie can never forget about the Feanorians, but
we can't forget about these people while we're telling these other stories. And the problem is that if we do Túrin and then 2 seasons later we go back to the same time period and do Tuor, now the audience either already knows what all those people are doing, or now they've been waiting 2 seasons to find out what's been happening to all those people. And you ask anybody who watched The Walking Dead, people hate that.
Yeah. No, it's hard. And also, I mean, I would say this seems, I'm not saying it's inescapable, Marie, as you said, you know, it can be done, and it can be done well, you know, in various modes. But the fact of the matter is, there's a kind of chronological immediacy to watching a visual, you know, to watching a TV show, to doing a visual encounter with a story, right? That you just, no matter how compelling the narrative in a written text, it doesn't have that same sense of, just in this, the same thing that enables an author in a written text to do a significant aside, even in the middle of like an action sequence, right? I mean, like, there could be a fight happening. You could be in the middle of a battle, and the narrator could, I mean, this could be done badly and could be done well, but could theoretically take like a whole paragraph in which to like talk about something quite, you know, to kind of, you know what I mean? To like interrupt the action with a long description, or a long aside, even a long discursus even.
Yeah. Perhaps you need to know the history of the Paris sewer system, for instance, and you need to have it all laid out for the reader, who is maybe curious about whether or not Marius is going to die. At this point in time, but nope, got to get the whole history of the Paris sewer system.
You might need to understand what the smell of a wooden boat is right in the middle of chasing a whale.
I was going to say, you might even need to know exactly how the whaling line weaves around from eye to eye around the entire boat. You know, just as you're about to set out hunting away. No, Moby Dick is the most egregious example.
I could probably talk for about an hour and a half on the way that Melville does that sort of thing.
I love the whaling chapters in Moby Dick. Huge fan. Huge fan.
But
those aren't the ones that bother me. It's the time out to talk about how Captain Ahab would sit on the deck with his hat just so over his head. You couldn't really tell if he was asleep or awake because you couldn't really see his eye, but it looked like he could see if he was awake. I don't care. I don't care anymore.
I get it.
The third chapter on whales in art was what got me, but the chapter on the whiteness of the whale is actually very well done.
Great chapter.
And reminded me of Saruman and Theoden and stuff. Like it's good.
Yeah.
So there's stuff in there worth reading, but
of course.
But
anyway, the point is, like, you can do that in a written. Almost no filmmaker could get away with that kind of. I mean, it's theoretically, anything's theoretically possible, but that kind of thing, to in the middle of an action sequence, be like, and now we're just going to pan away and do something. I mean, as I say, there's a kind of immediacy to film that you just don't have in. And so I think, to me, that's one of the biggest problems, because no matter what we do, no matter how we try to set it up, if we go from Near Ninth to Túrin to Doriath, there's this sense of like, we've been following the story, right? This is what's going on, and it's going to be weird, and it's going to be hard to be like, okay, how far have we caught up to now? You know, even if we can get them through the jump backwards at the beginning of season 10,
right?
It's going to be hard.
And also the rage at like not getting to know what happens next for an entire season, like this.
Yes. Before we rejoin the refugees at the No, agreed. It's now, challenging. There are costs in the published texts. I agree with you that I think the costs would be higher to try to follow this in visual form.
So
on the flip side,
if you go to the next slide, it shows you a very linear path for all the seasons thus far in visual format. And then if you go to the one after that, it discusses this one.
Okay, so
we
this
can
is
keep advancing through our slides.
This is the chronology. The interweaving our colored circles here are this is the text version.
Right. What we've done so far leading into the text version.
Okay, right.
More or less.
Yeah. Okay, right.
The flip side of all of that is essentially the interweaving of stories that we've done up until this point is child's play by comparison to what we would have to do to get everything that's kind of happening kind of concurrently. And of course, we would have to play with the timeline, and we'd have to play with the events to make sure that the tone lines up. So, for example, if you moved Tuor's entire story forward to be concurrent with Túrin's, right? Now you have to, like, his story in that season would have to end when he reached Gondolin, right? Like, it would have to be, because you couldn't do, for chronological
You're saying
purposes.
that you don't want to go back and forth in the same scene between Tuor and Idril getting married in Gondolin and, like, Niniel throwing herself off the waterfall?
No.
Like, no?
No.
Yeah.
Nope.
That's the juxtaposition you're seeking to avoid.
Yeah. I mean, and even
Wait, no, even better. We have Tuor and Idril, right, wooing each other, and then we have Niniel and Túrin wooing each other at the same time. Oh, yeah. Bring the couples together.
But you want to, like, another thing that would be tempting to do, some people might be tempted to do, is to set it up so that the fall of Gondolin is concurrent with Túrin fighting Glaurung. Mm-hmm. And those are two extremely different pieces.
Yes.
The fight with Glaurung feels very visceral. Like, it's very down in the mud for him. Túrin has to pull out all the stops and fight extremely dirty to get that done.
Yes.
Whereas that's not what we're looking at the Fall of Gondolin. The Fall of Gondolin is a desperate defeat, and it doesn't feel the same way.
Agreed.
Right.
No, it is challenging. I mean, it is true that it's one thing to say, look at the costs of the following the book order, but there are.
If you take it apart, you better put it back together in a good way.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
I wouldn't call them costs in the same way. I'd call it challenges. Like, they're
extremely challenging.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Fortunately, our long ordeal in making this thing thus far has prepared us to meet those challenges.
Yeah, it's a good thing we weren't trying to do this from the start. Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Okay, so, all right. Okay, so we talked about the traditional plan. So let's more about.
Yeah. So the next one is what happens if you try and put Túrin and Tuor together.
Okay.
Where would you want to go with that, and what would be the things to avoid is kind of the thought process there. And as Nick was saying, there's a lot of things there that you don't want to juxtapose, so you would have to be careful how you do it.
Yeah.
The minimalist version would just be to include the childhood of Tuor in that season, and then cut Tuor's story off and focus on Túrin the rest of the time. But you could go further. What if you go all the way to him arriving in Gondolin? Because you don't want to get to the Gondolin part yet, but what if you at least have Tuor meet Varanwe, right?
Yeah.
Then what is that going to be matching up with in Túrin's story? Yeah. And how are you going to handle the tone of Túrin, which is this very depressing, every choice you make is bad story, versus Tuor, you are the chosen one, and like almost set this aside for you from the beginning, and like
look how everything is working out for you. Yeah. Exactly.
So there's this very different story we're telling. They're cousins, sure, but like, so Tuor's youth is in Dor-lómin, and Túrin's going to return to Dor-lómin. They're not there at the same time, but there are parts of that fit. Like, you can do parts of it, but at what point do you want Tuor to have the focus and not be sharing time with Túrin's tragedy?
Well, and this is, I mean, to be totally honest, I have to admit that one of the things that I struggle with is like combining anything with the Túrin story. You know, it's like, I mean, the Túrin, okay, no, let me be more precise. Combining anything with the Túrin story without becoming like satirical.
Like you said, wouldn't it be funny too?
Wouldn't it be funny too? Or like, meanwhile, back in the Túrin story where everything sucks, right? Like, let's go back to, it could almost become its own parody if you're not careful. Like it's a hard story to do. Again, it's a challenge. It's really interesting.
Although it's a little Tale of Two Cities too, in that sense, which isn't. I mean, like you could lean right into that, right. and essentially say, you know, look, these are these two guys that are in, not entirely, they're both fostered by elves. Mm-hmm. One in the royal court of the elven king that the hobbit elven king wishes he could be, and right. the other in exile in the middle of nowhere. Mm-hmm. Right. And charting the chart of those two journeys forward, there's something there too that could be worth telling. But again, you gotta pull apart all the pieces and now match them up so that they start making sense together if you were going to do that.
Yeah. And Agreed. The other challenge then is that you would be spreading Turin's story over 2 seasons. Because if you're going to be intercutting him with somebody, there's a lot of story for Turin. Right. So we would need the 2 seasons. Yeah. And now, what do you use as the season finale in the middle of both of those stories? And you can do it because Turin has all these things. Yeah, exactly. The Fall of Nargothrond sounds like a good ending point. But then where in the Tuor story do you want to end and pick up? And now you're probably on different timelines.
Wedding.
As the second one.
No, sorry.
As the first one.
And Tuor.
Okay, so you want to do the whole get him into Gondolin.
Well, no, I'm just saying. I'm suggesting possible midpoints. Yeah. That would be one logical. Right. The having the first season be Journey to Gondolin, having second season being, young Eärendil in Gondolin and Maegwyn's betrayal and the fall.
Okay, so, now the challenge. Now the challenge. So the first thing is, what do you put as the endpoints of the first season, which I think is a solvable problem.
Right. Yeah,
now you have the second season where you want the endpoint to be the death of Glaurung and the fall of Gondolin.
Well,
and do we really want that?
You could back off of Tuor for a season.
Right. And that's the thing is,
and do Fall of Gondolin along. Yeah, you could do that.
Right. So in that case, you don't need to get him to Gondolin by the end of the first season. Well, he could be.
Honestly, if we did the wedding at the end of the first season, that would give them like a good half season of happy, marriage and young
Eärendil and
childhood of young Eärendil. Because there's not a whole lot of action. Like they're married, they're being married, they're having a kid, the kid is growing up, right? And Maegwyn is creeping on them, and then Maegwyn is betraying them.
Idril,
the actual
Idril builds a tunnel,
Idril builds it, right. Of course, we have to have the important excavation and construction scenes of the tunnel. But no, you're right. There are things there. But again, it's not like, by itself, it's not like, oh yeah, that's a packed season of action, right? Right. It would definitely be the lesser half of the two if we want to,
Right. So then maybe the fall of Gondolin comes out of nowhere, which maybe is good because that's kind of how the story goes.
Right.
But it might seem that we've stacked some of our big events right on top of each other.
Well, and don't forget, we have a third thing that we need to interlay in here, and that is it's not like we can wait to start the ruin of Doriath until after the Túrin story, right? We've got to get the Silmaril. There's things that we need to do, right? That we need to move things along.
Right. So if at some point it's like, well, why just intercut Tuor and Turin? Mm-hmm. Let's just intercut everything, which I believe is another slide.
Right.
And that is where you start taking the pieces of these stories and putting them together, because Doriath is an important story. Doriath is part of Turin's story, but the pieces of Doriath are very different. The death of Thingol and the Noglamir is not the same as the story of Dior trying to restart Doriath from scratch and then get sacked by Feanorians. That's a completely different story. So they don't need to be in the same season. Like, we don't need to see and now's the Doriath season where everything terrible happens in Doriath.
Right.
we could very easily take pieces of that and put it, well, here's the wanderings of Húrin that includes the Noglamir and leads
Yeah.
to the death of Thingol. And then in a totally different season, be like, welcome to Doriath, Dior. Have fun.
Right.
You know,
Right.
like we could.
Good luck with that, Dior. Yeah.
Poor
Yeah.
Dior.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I feel woefully underprepared for this because I feel like I would need to go over, and I feel like Maria's kind of done this in these slides here.
Yeah.
I would need to go through all of these stories and pick apart the individual events and start stacking them.
Right. So let's look. So yeah, let's read what Marie was thinking of here for 8 and 9. In the
there's a visual on the next slide that might make it easier, but you can read it first before you switch.
If I had,
Okay.
if I had brought my reading glasses down, I could.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
Hang on,
okay.
no,
All right. Okay, now hang on. I got it. So I will read it. All right. Hang on. Footnote before we do. I just want to mention how excited I am to talk about this stuff, especially since. So we just finished doing the end of the War of the Jewels in Mythgard Academy at the end of the last one. So all of that part where Christopher Tolkien goes through the really, really muddy textual situation for the fall of Doriath and the wanderings of Húrin and the fall of Doriath and all that stuff. And including, of course, because we spent a good deal of time reading and discussing those passages, which were some of the most direct and moving passages from Christopher speaking on his own behalf in the entire History of Middle-earth series, where he says, this is how I did it. This is why I did it. And I think I was wrong. And I think it sucks. And I regret doing it. Right. I mean, it's so there's a bunch of places here where I would really like to. I feel like the memory of Christopher's rather tortured language in some places talking about this is still fresh in my memory from those discussions. And so I'm feeling like I would love to take the opportunity to explore how to do. This is one of the places where I want to. I'm very interested in setting out to go in a different direction from the text, not just in this terms of ordering, but the content of the story. Right. To explore some of these other versions of the story that Christopher says could be explored or even have a better textual basis than the one he ended up deciding to put into the text.
Right. Because he obviously had the challenge of having to have a finished text that was coherent and made sense. And we have the same challenge, but we naturally are making everything up. So it's not like we need to find a passage that Tolkien wrote. And say, okay, we need that text to go with it. It can be, here's his ideas that were in the Wanderings of Húrin, and here's his ideas that were other places. And let's put something together that feels like the best version of the story to tell.
Yeah, especially one that fits best with the story as we've been telling it and everything. Anyway, so that's going to be great fun. Okay, all right. So Nick, here's what Maria was suggesting. Season 8 would focus on the tale of Túrin, but would also include Tuor's childhood and the death of Rian, the early portion of the Doriath story, and Turgon sending ships from Gondolin. Also Sauron and Galadriel bits.
Whatever we come up with for their story,
Right, Season 9 would focus on Tuor's story, but his childhood would be in Season 8, and the fall of Gondolin would be in Season 10. Also, Season 9 could include the Nauglamir and the death of Thingol. Wow. Okay. All right. Hang on. All right. Let me. There's a chart with lots of hexagons. So okay.
So the items under each season are not in any particular order necessarily.
Okay. It's more of a. This is just stuff that it needs to be included.
Could go in a season. Yeah, that could go in the same season.
All right. So under the heading of Union of Maedhros Season 7, we get Húrin and Huor, Sauron and the Easterlings, Galadriel, probably, Romance of Gwyndor and Finduilas. Oh yeah, we got to set that up, clearly. I forgot that one, but yes, that clearly
it's a single season story for obvious reasons.
Obvious reasons. And then of course, ending with Unnumbered Tears. Season 8 focuses on Túrin and includes Túrin and Doriath, Tuor's childhood, right, his fostering in the wilderness, Turgon sending out ships. So Turgon sending out ships means that one major storyline is Turgon's anticipation of the end, right? And of his attempts to reach out to Valinor.
And practically gets Varan away where we need him.
Yeah, well, also important. Yeah. The outlaws, right? So Turin among the outlaws. Of course, Hurin's captivity. We will have gotten Hurin's captivity. The fall of Nargothrond, Túrin in Brethil. Oh, all the way up to Túrin in Brethil, and the death of Glaurung. Okay, so you're going through the whole Turin story here.
If you want to, if we decide to push parts of it back, because it's like you'll notice there's a lot of hexagons under that. There's
a lot
heading.
Of hexagons. Yeah. It is the longest.
So
one.
It was if you had a Túrin season, this is what it would look like.
Yeah.
If you want to split up Túrin, have at it.
Ooh, so this is tricky. So go ahead.
Well, because Philip brought this up also, and my thinking was the best place to chop off Túrin is at the fall of Gondolin, which
Nargothrond.
That word, the other place, which would not be that hard to juxtapose with Tuor arriving in Vinyamar. That word. Yeah. I can't words tonight for some reason. The thing I like about that is it kind of sets up Glaurung as an antagonist for Tuor in the following season. Because one of the things that I've been kind of like that has been hurting my brain about the Túrin story is that Glaurung doesn't enter as an antagonist until more than halfway through his story.
Yes.
Which doesn't feel right. Like Túrin, like the conflict between Túrin and Glaurung doesn't feel like it's resolving anything really, because Glaurung is a new arrival to his story.
Yes.
Whereas setting Glaurung up as an antagonist to Túrin personally, I feel helps tell that story in a more fulfilling way, as far as on screen goes.
Yeah, it does make sense. In as much as like the overall, the curse of Morgoth is the main like antagonist essentially, right?
But it doesn't
of the Túrin story.
But it's impersonal.
Yes,
right.
And
like at least in Lord of the Rings,
personal nemesis.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas at least in Lord of the Rings, you have the ring as the antagonist that represents Sauron.
Yes.
Right. People complain about the fact that the main antagonist never shows up in Lord of the Rings. That's not really true. He's always there because the ring is there.
Right. He's always kind of there, at least. Yes. No. Right. Exactly. No. That so basically what you're suggesting is having the end of the Túrin season 1, by ending it with the fall of Nargothrond, we essentially end it with the arrival on the scene of the one who will be the primary antagonist,
right?
And is also and his arrival. The other thing, of course, that's going to be a major theme, especially in the front half of Túrin's story, right, is the role of his own choices, right? Túrin personally screwing it up. He makes bad choices in the second half of the story too, but I think actually fewer, or at least the ones that he does more explicitly under the influence. Like marrying his sister, could happen to anyone, right? He didn't. That's not a bad decision in the same way that I'm not going to go back to Doriath and accept the pardon of the king is a bad decision. It's a totally different category, right? And even
we see more of the curse in the second part,
whereas
in the first part we see more of his hard-headedness. Exactly,
and the culmination of that, of course, is Nargothrond, right? The bridge across the River Narog is the culmination of his career of boneheaded decisions, and so again to have the finale of that season be when the last of his boneheaded decisions really comes into roost. Dave has joined us. Dave, welcome. when the last of his boneheaded decisions finally come home to roost. Can you guess we're talking about Túrin? Yeah. So we're having a fun conversation talking about projecting how to interleave the stories of Túrin and Tuor. How to what a chronological, a more rigidly chronological, not rigidly, that's the wrong word. To attempt a more chronological retelling, fluidly chronological. That's right. Yeah, that's better. What that would look like.
You mean like a retelling of the two that in some way acknowledges their respective stories and actually attempts to line them up somehow?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
The other thing that I really like about ending with the fall of Nargothrond and the arrival of Túrin and Vinyamar is that it allows us Tuor in Vinyamar. It allows us to have the beginning of the following season, like near the beginning of it, have the moment where they cross paths to kind of because while their stories aren't chronologically in the same place in history, right? At that moment, everything syncs back up, right?
Yeah.
So it allows us to kind of start things off almost in a way that we're acknowledging, okay, now everything's at the same time.
Right. No, that is attractive. I mean, one of the biggest challenges. No, among the big challenges, we've talked about a lot of big challenges already. So another big challenge is simply the imbalance. I mean, I think we just have to acknowledge the imbalance. There's so much more story in Túrin plus Doriath, right?
Yes.
Than in Tuor through the fall of... I mean, there's way too much peace and happiness in the Tuor story, right? It's short for that reason.
Yes.
A lot of peace and happiness in the middle, which, by the way, is nice and flexible. I mean, it makes Tuor's timeline pretty plastic,
malleable, right? Yeah.
I mean, how long is it between when he arrives in Gondolin and when he and Idril get married? Well, we can flex with that a little bit, right? Similarly, how long are they married? Well, we know at least a little while. We don't want Eärendil to be an infant, at the fall of Gondolin, but
right.
Still there's
he needs to be old enough to have wielded Sting.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that does bring up the point that there's a lot of mortal characters at the end of this first age.
Yes.
So in all these seasons, so there are a lot of time constraints of who's doing what when, to make everyone be the right age so that they're not babies when they're supposed to be fighting battles and such. So the characters that line up are Eärendil is pretty much the same age as Outling. I mean, they're both kids at the same time.
We do need to make sure
and then they
more or less
meet,
coincide.
And they meet at the Havens when they're more or less 20 in a bit,
when
right?
More or less marriageable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, yes. For instance.
Ready to do the thing that they're supposed to do.
Give or take.
Yeah. So there's flexibility, but only so much. And that means that the Dior and Doriath storyline and the Tuor and Idril and Gondolin storyline have to coexist.
Yeah, they do.
At some point. So it's possible that with all this peace into our story, we can drag him out for several seasons and whatever. If we're going to do 2 seasons for Túrin, fine. It just bumps everything down a season.
And if Tuor is the problem that, okay, I want to make sure that if Tuor has a kid later in his life as opposed to earlier, that's not
a big deal,
right?
So it's more or less.
He's married to an elf,
right? Eärendil has to be around 7 or 8 at the fall of Gondolin,
right?
I think.
Okay, so that makes sense. So I have slightly, it's not exactly an off the wall question, but here's my question: what story could we or would we want to essentially append to the end of the fall of Gondolin story? That is to say, one way to solve the story imbalance problem, right, would be we don't have to necessarily take the refugees from Gondolin straight down to the havens of Sirion. or we could add more story about the establishment of the havens of Sirion by them prior to the refugees from Doriath showing up, right? So we can, that's one place where we can, again, correct the imbalance a little bit, because again, the problem is not just the Tuor story versus the Túrin story. That's kind of bad enough, right? As far as imbalance is concerned. But the fact that we also have to do the entire wanderings of Húrin, now Glamir, Silmaril, death of Thingol, war with the dwarves, Feanorians coming in, you know, there's a lot in addition to the two. So if we do, we could stretch out Tuor a bit, but if we stretch him out too much, we might as well go back to the book version, right? I mean, it might as well be, you know, 2 seasons. Meanwhile, there's Tuor, still happy, right? You know, he and Idro are thinking of getting a bigger place. You know, like, it's seriously, like, there's nothing to talk about, you know, there. So,
which is one reason to not start or go very far with his story. If we're going to do turn over 2 seasons,
well, that's one
in the
option.
First season, maybe only do the childhood, and then in the second season, after the fall of Nargothrond, get him down to Vinyamar.
No, but see, here's what
I know.
There's no point. There's no ending to his story. It's just we're just doing things that happen to him.
I'm suggesting that Gondolin is on fire at the same time that Túrin is committing suicide.
That Túrin is committing suicide.
I'm saying we bring them to culmination at the same time, and then when we then continue the Túrin story through the Doriath cycle, we are then doing something else. Maybe it's the arrival at the havens of Sirion. Maybe we're using the refugees of, you know, it would, because there are two effects of doing this, of folding resolution of the rest of other Beleriand stories into this. One advantage is that we balance the stories and make it work out a bit. The other advantage is one of the things that I would really look forward to trying to do, which is actually spending some darn time with Eärendil before we send him off on a boat, right? I mean, we could do a whole season of the voyages of Eärendil, like actually have him do his, you know, we could have, it's like, you know, Eärendil and the Voyage of the Dawn Treader if we wanted to, but you know, like that kind of episodic voyaging storyline thing, but without even something like that, by spending more time with Tuor and Eärendil.
For the spinoff.
Save for the spinoff, yeah, exactly. If we spend more time with Tuor and Idril and Eärendil and Glorfindel, right? Well, okay, briefly, we don't spend that much more time with Glorfindel. We've already disposed of him, but with Idril and Eärendil and Tuor, between Glorfindel's death, essentially, and finally not when they arrive at the havens of Sirion, when Elwing and the people from Doriath show up. Right, that's the sort of the time gap, which Tolkien almost completely skips over, like by just telling us, and they went down to Sirion, you know, and established havens. He does it in like a paragraph, right? What the people of Gondolin do post death of Glorfindel, right?
Right. The thing is, I don't necessarily want the fall of Gondolin and the death of Glaurung paired up. Well, I'd much rather have the fall of Gondolin and the sack of Doriath put together in a season.
I hear that, and I know it also does.
And then we can do the Eärendil Elwing parallel and put them together at the havens, like.
I hear you. No, there would be costs to this. The biggest cost, I think, is that we lose the whole idea of Gondolin is the last of the refuges of the elves. Like, it wouldn't be the last anymore if we did it that way. And I'm not trying to say that's not a big cost. It would be, that would be expensive. But as long as it lasts longer than
Nargothrond, it is the last, so it's fine.
Yeah, well, I mean, Doriath would technically be outlasting it.
But it would have to outlast Himring, too.
It does outlast Doriath under Thingol, but it doesn't outlast Doriath under Dior.
No, not in my version. Doriath
not in
Thingol. What I was just suggesting, Thingol would be dying after the fall of Gondolin.
I understand that.
I feel like you're going to have a hard time matching the matching. Go on.
I say, even in Tolkien's version, Doriath is still there, just not with
Right.
Thingol.
Right.
But you're
Yeah, I
right.
see what
You're going to leave Thingol there, so Doriath is
it'd
really
be
the last bastion.
Yeah, it would be exactly,
not
and that's
Gondolin.
that's a big deal.
That's a pretty heavy cost.
You're also going to have a hard time matching up the fall of Gondolin with the fight between Túrin and Glaurung. Like the tonal value of those two set pieces
Agreed.
are don't fit well.
Agreed, but here's my question. What fits with it?
Doriath.
The fall of Doriath?
Dior's being
Gondolin?
Yeah. The fall of Gondolin and the kinslaying attack in Doriath.
Sure.
Yeah.
No. I agree with that. I'm thinking the other way around.
And go in the same season.
What matches with the suicide of Túrin is what I'm saying.
I mean, nothing.
Nothing. Exactly.
That's the whole point of that story.
Right.
Well, I could have asked you what matches with the Baron and Luthien story. The answer is nothing.
I know.
That's why we had a lot of bottle.
That's why we did it on its own, right?
Exactly.
But that's the challenge here. I mean, I think one way or another, like either we have to pick something that we're going to basically be doing in parallel with the death of Glaurung, or we've just got to marry Tuor off and leave him happy and forget about him while Túrin's going to go off and commit suicide.
Well, that's why I don't want to parallel the Túrin and Tuor stories. I don't think they parallel well, but I do want to interlace everything. So I'm fine with telling parts of stories at different times. You need something to pair with Túrin's death. Do something with Sauron in that season and have him do a thing. Like, if anything, if he's doing a thing that somehow, depending on where we are with Tuor's story, leads to the people of Gondolin getting anti-Balrog technology, like that kind of would fit with his desires and with the story we're about to tell. Right. So, like, there's things we could do, but nothing pairs with that.
So I would argue that Tuor nearly giving up hope for his life. Like, what is his life worth? Before he gets to Vinyamar, what is his life worth?
Wait, we're not even getting him to Vinyamar before the death of Túrin?
Hold on. I didn't say that.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. Okay. What I'm saying is that before he runs into Ulmo and gets
he's living in the wilderness.
Objectively, his life has no value or meaning. Like, he might feel like he has a purpose. He might feel like he has a purpose.
Yeah.
But nobody else does.
Nobody else.
No, but there's no evidence to suggest that. And so him having to choose hope over hopelessness. And I feel like that's part of why he is the chosen one, because he does choose hope over hopelessness. Whereas Túrin chooses hopelessness, right? Well, very, very clearly chooses hopelessness. I mean,
he again makes choices that end up there, at least,
right? Yeah. But also Túrin's in the exact same place, in a way. I mean, sure, he's lost a whole bunch of stuff by this point. By the time he faces off with Glaurung, but he doesn't have to do that. He could just walk away. He could just take the people somewhere else. He could just have a life.
In his defense, he tried.
Yeah.
He stopped. I mean, I mean, right.
But the dragon was coming, and he had to decide to either run away or do something about it. And he went with do something about it.
Yeah, no, exactly.
In quite a spectacular fashion. So it is a pretty.
But then after
he is his father's son in that moment.
Right.
Right.
Like,
he gets some credit for making that choice.
But then after he kills Glaurung,
well, that's kind of lousy.
Still could have done something with his life,
and instead he
didn't. Right? And I'm not saying it's his fault, right? Like
there are factors.
This is not me saying that people who commit suicide don't like.
I hear you. And with Túrin, it's a big deal. I mean, with Túrin, the complications are a big deal.
Yeah. So the complications of trying to tell a story that involves sibling incest and multiple suicides.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to tread very carefully through the end of the
Oh,
Turin
yes.
story.
Right.
Oh, yes. Yes.
But essentially,
And don't forget Meglin.
yeah.
Yes.
What about Meglin?
We're just getting lots and lots of incest or potential incest, and it's just like very sorted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
So-
with
so-
Meglin, he's had a cursed childhood. Like we knew that kid was going nowhere good.
There are factors.
So,
there are factors.
but
I think
the end of
Túrin
his
we could tell
story-
pretty early on too. He was
but with the end of his story, yes, obviously he had the motivator of being jealous about Idril, but his story's about betrayal, and
so
he is
Yeah.
the traitor who's the downfall.
Yeah.
Like that's where his story goes, and that's a different level of sordid. Like you're allowed to
So
hate
we-
the traitor.
So are we lining up the death, Túrin's suicide and the death of Nienor with the wedding of Tuor and Idril?
I hope not.
That's what we're discussing, and
That was
I
my
think all of us
suggestion
are,
of how beautifully it
I
could
kind of like it. I mean, because I feel like if you're going to parallel these guys, sort of, if you're going to line them up, then it has to be a contrast, right?
You almost have to lean into the contrast.
Yeah.
right.
It has
Well,
to be
that's what
like-
we were saying before.
things are going to hell for Túrin and things are going really well for Tuor.
Right, but that's
Until they don't. Like
Well,
Tuor's
yeah.
there
Well,
for the
yeah,
fall of
fair enough.
Gondolin, and he showed up with a message of time to get out. This
Right.
place is doomed. Like
Sure.
that is
Yeah.
literally his message. And Turgon's like, it's fine. So
Right.
you can stay and marry my daughter. And Tuor knows that this place is doomed and it's time to get out.
mm,
Like, so it's a happy wedding, and he was thrilled to meet Idril, obviously. But that story is not like happy, happy, joy, joy. Like,
Not
it's really not.
completely. Not completely.
yeah.
I agree. Though again,
So-
when you're just thinking of the careers of the two guys, it's pretty sharply contrasting.
See, now I would say that have Tuor and Idril developing a relationship be part of just a small part of a story for a later season after Turin's dead.
Right. I would much prefer Turgon welcoming Tuor
Right,
and then denying
that-
his message being
Right.
contrasted with the death of Turin.
Right.
Because
Okay.
if we've already seen the fall of Nargothrond, we saw that happen. Glaurung's dead, so you're like, cool, that's great. But when someone shows up with a message from Olmo saying, hey, this place is doomed, maybe leave, and the king says, nope, everything's fine, I have really great
Right.
walls or a really
Right.
great bridge, then
having
audience-
having that happen at the same time that Hurin is being released, because that's kind of the denouement after Turin's dead.
After Turin's
Right.
death, right.
Right.
Yeah.
After Turin's dead, having Hurin being released is kind of
setting that all in motion.
a denouement of that. And now we're kind of, because Hurin and Turin are they're a dyad, right? They're a forced dyad in a way, right? Story wise.
Okay.
All right.
I don't know. I couldn't think of a good way to describe that relationship, but
All right. So let's think about let's kind of put these together. Let's see how it works. I'm not in any way trying to force my crazy idea of adding. I'm just trying to balance it out. So let's see how it works. Let's start, Marie, backwards from your endpoint of Fall of Gondolin, Second Kinslaying happening at the same time. Okay. So if we end season 10 with those two things, and we start season 8 with Túrin and Doriath and Tuor as a slave then in the wilderness, right? So we got their child at the beginning of season 8. We've got the Fall of Gondolin, Second Kinslaying at the end of season 10. Let's imagine, Nick, let's go from your first endpoint. So season 8 ends with the Fall of Nargothrond. I really like that. Dave, that's what we're in the very middle of talking about when you arrived. That would mean the events of the Túrin story itself are divided between two seasons. Season 1 is from Tuor and Doriath through Túrin building the bridge and Glaurung coming and sacking. So it's like the story of all of Túrin's most boneheaded decisions culminating with building a bridge over the River Narag, right? And then the chickens come home to roost. Glaurung comes, the antagonist, his personal antagonist for season 9. Then we got Glaurung versus Túrin in season 9. Okay. And then, Nick, you're wanting to parallel that in the Tuor story with Tuor arriving at Vinyamar and meeting Ulmo, right?
That's
the climax of the Tuor story in season 8.
The Tuor story in season 8. Yes.
Okay.
I've been doing that all night too.
Great. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. Okay. So the Tuor story of season 8 ends with. Okay. Sorry, Dave. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say. I think the Túrin. I think that sounds good to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you guys. I don't know if you guys all agree, but like to me, I'm like, yes, that makes sense. That it feels like we've solved that. That's a nice structure.
I agree.
It's like
that feels good. My question is like the middle.
Yeah.
Right. Season 9 is the challenge, I think.
Where do you glue in? Yeah,
right. Yeah. So what we would have to do is we'd have to support now the Glaurung is the antagonist, personal antagonist to Túrin. There has to be a development of that relationship.
Yeah. In season 9.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, forgive me. So Nienor / El encounters Glaurung after the sack of Nargothrond. Is that correct? I'm remembering that right?
That is correct.
That's part
almost
of it.
all the Glaurung action would be season 9 in this case.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's part of it, right? Yep. And we just need a few more pieces to that. Maybe he forces the people that Túrin is and this might support what we were talking about before. Maybe Glaurung, through his minions or his personal presence, force the people in Brethil to move around a couple of times. Like there's like this cat and mouse game going on, and finally Túrin decides enough is enough. I've got to deal with him.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
We would have just thinking purely in terms of book events, right?
Right.
Season 9 would begin with the like bamboozlement of Túrin, like the ensorcelment of Túrin by Glaurung, right. His trip north, right? Mm-hmm. And his killing of Brother the Northern,
his encounter with Tuor.
Yes, the crossing paths with Tuor, then his return back and going to the people of Brethil, being taken in Brethil, mm-hmm. Then the Nienor and Morwen story, right? Like they're going to Nargothrond, mm-hmm. and then Nienor's amnesia. And then the marriage, and then the final conflict with Glaurung and suicide. That by itself totally feels that's fine. Like
I will say that the least icky version of the marriage of Túrin story is we find out when Túrin finds out what has happened. Right? Like I'm not sure how.
So you're wanting like a crying game reveal at the end of the season?
I don't want is a very strong word, but I'm saying like that's definitely the least
icky. Yeah.
Yes.
Or at least it compresses the ickiness into one sharp, horrifying moment.
Which
instead of having to watch wedded bliss between two people when you're going,
I hear you.
But you don't know.
Pros and cons. Yeah.
Now, as a comment, we certainly can preserve the reveal as late as we want, but the audience is only not in on that if they're not familiar with adult Nienor, which means the Nienor Glaurung thing doesn't work. It would have to be shown later. Now you can still do that.
We do that in flashback.
Well, you could have a Nienor episode as the final episode of the season. So obviously, like, Túrin will be passed out for most of that, and we can tell her story in flashback or something.
Actually, it would be kind of fun. It would be kind of fun to like seed hints and like have her have like sort of fragmented memories, and I mean that it
I
would
heard
be
describe
kind
a
of fun to kind of play that
childhood
along.
that's eerily similar.
Something, like there could be things, there could be moments.
There could be moments and hints. The thing is, I'm
It's-
saying though, if part of this is we're trying to build up Glaurung as Turin's particular antagonist,
Yes.
that is directly opposed to preserving the secret of Nienor. You could probably only pick one.
I agree with you, and I would say that the holding back on the reveal is the worst written version. I would say
Possibly.
I think
I'm not thinking it's fun, but anyway, yeah. Okay. Anyway, well,
there's ways of sorting it out when we get to season 9. Apparently now. My main concern.
Let's go back to the overall shape, because we're coming up on what I feel to be the problem.
Right.
Yes. So I'll hear what your problem is, and I'll tell you what my problem is.
My problem is what happens in Gondolin now in season 9. An entire season 9 of. Ooh, wait, I know. He could go through a different gate each episode. Right, as no, I mean, like we just
we have
arrive
to
in
get
Gondolin.
him there. We have to get him there first.
Because the idea was, remember, season 8 ends in Vinyamar.
Yeah, I know.
So the whole meeting Varanwe and traveling to Gondolin and then getting into Gondolin, and then we're ending with Turgon saying no.
That
so
sounded
there's not
like
a
2
lot
episodes to me, but
right,
I mean, there's not much. There's not.
But
much.
also he doesn't have to be like the number one protagonist of the season either.
Yes.
That's my point. Is that there would
true.
be not very much Tuor in season 9 if we're doing it this way, which is fine. The challenge is not that we underdid Tuor, because again, we're not just interlacing Túrin and Tuor. So like, if there's a little less Tuor, there can be more Galadriel, whatever. Like, we'll put something else in there.
Right.
The problem is now we can't do anything with Thingol or the Noglamir until after the death of Túrin and the release of Húrin.
Yeah.
Right.
So if that doesn't happen till the end of season 9, which is fine, that means that whatever we're going to do with Thingol needs to be in season 10,
right?
Which means I'm now saying fall of Gondolin and fall of second attack of Doriath have to be season 11.
Whoa, wait, hang on. We already have. So
do you want to do the Noglamir and kill Thingol, and then bring Dior into Doriath, and then have the fall of Gondolin, and then sack Doriath again, all in one season?
Sounds good. It's it's a full schedule, but
because of all the stories that we could split over multiple seasons, Doriath seemed the story that least needed to be held all together in one season.
Well,
and
this,
except for Túrin.
Right, Túrin. No, well, Túrin needs to be all together.
Túrin's got to be dead for it to move past.
Right.
For Noglamir,
it's got to before it can really get going. Yeah.
Right. We need to finish Túrin before we can start anything with Doriath.
I'm actually not that concerned about fitting all that stuff in one season.
Me neither.
Okay.
Me neither.
All right.
Neither.
I just all the parts of this of the Ruin of Doriath seem the least. This must all be in one season because people aren't going to know what's going on unless we do it all together. It's like I was perfectly happy to do a Noglamir Thingol part one where and a Dior and second Kinslaying somewhere else and just have them be separate stories.
Well, okay. Well, let's talk about that for a second. I mean, since I'm throwing out wild and iconoclastic ideas this evening already, what if we detached the Noglamir from Húrin?
So why are the dwarves coming to Doriath?
No. He's not saying detach the Noglamir from Thingol. He's saying detach it.
I know.
It gets to Thingol via some other means.
Sometime after the fall of Nargothrond, but before the well, the only way you can do that and not ruin it is to have it somehow
I'm not suggesting it wouldn't ruin it. I'm just saying. But I mean, this would enable us to
start the story earlier, which is what I would want.
All that has to happen is a survivor of Nargothrond has to get out with the Noglamir.
Physically, that's all that needs to happen.
Yeah.
Thematically, we have a visit to Nargothrond built into the story.
Meme?
No. What's his
Nienor?
face?
Bellic?
Yeah.
Bellic?
No, the other one.
Mablung.
Mablung.
Remember, Mablung goes to Nargothrond.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, anyone can go there after.
No, but I mean, in the book,
Dragon's
he literally goes and scouts Nargothrond while Glowring is busy ensorceling Nienor, right? So, I mean,
right. So, Hurin throwing the Noglamir at Thingol's feet makes the whole Noglamir situation a Curse of Morgoth thing, right?
Yes.
Hurin has accidentally caused the downfall of Gondolin and Doriath single-handedly through no fault of his own.
Also, it makes it makes Hurin finding me right. There's less importance of Hurin visiting Nargothrond.
Totally. I mean, what I am again. I'm not suggesting this is like a perfect, beautiful solution,
or even
or even an acceptable and workable solution. I'm just brainstorming here of what options are, because again, the problem is this is we're trying to interleave and balance two stories that are massively multi
not to mention what's happening with
unbalanced.
Everybody else.
Yes. That's why that was the cause of my first suggestion. We need to involve everybody else. What happens to Himring? What are the Fëanorians doing in the meanwhile? Right?
Oh, well, I can tell you.
Good. But my point was, we could
where they fit in all these storylines. Don't worry.
I know. I wasn't worried about that. But what I'm saying is, that was why I was suggesting before. That's the kind of thing that I was saying we could do with Tuor, Idril, and young Eärendil after the fall of Gondolin, if we added some there to keep them occupied and involved with stuff while the long story of Túrin, then Hurin, then Thingol unfolds, then Dior unfolds, right?
Yeah, so I kind of would like, if we're going to split Turin into 2 seasons and do 8 and 9 with Turin, and Nargothrond is destroyed at the end of 8, I would kind of like the Noglamir and the death of Thingol to be in 9, contrasted with the rest of the Turin story. I know that ruins a big chunk of it, though, so I really don't like that I like
Exactly.
this. But timing-wise, I want Doriath's story to move along, and if we're splitting Turin into 2 seasons...
Why do you think it ruins it?
Because Turin is supposed to be the cause. He throws the necklace at his feet, and it's Thingol's choice, but the cursed necklace is only there because of Hurin.
Wait.
I'm going to raise an objection, but let Nick go first.
I'm just this feels like a Professor Olsen idea.
Oh no!
What if this is crazy? What if Hurin is released earlier in our story than in the book? Hang on, and is trying desperately to track down his kids and gets there too late, but does get to the Noglamir before the end of the season, and still throws it at his feet, and still doesn't make it to Brethil in time.
Oh my goodness!
Because I believe that Hurin and Túrin together, no contest. They take out Glaurung, no casualties.
So you have Hurin come running up just as Túrin
instead of Mablung being the one to be like,
yes,
have it be the bearer of bad news. It's literally
Hurin. Doing the impossible. How to make the Túrin story worse and more painful.
I mean, Morwen's still got to beat him there, but she was in the area, so it's fine.
Right.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay, so we might have some things to discuss when we get to season 9.
We will. But
we seem to be...
So somebody brought up in the chat that they don't know if Morgoth would release Hurin. Morgoth knows it's too late.
Yeah, obviously.
Morgoth knows there's no way he gets there in time.
Yeah.
Yep. And in
fact,
he would love to set this sort of event in motion.
Yeah.
Especially if we've seen that Hurin can see what's happening, but we cut it off before Túrin gets to Brethil, so he doesn't know Turin's in Brethil, and he doesn't know what's happened to Nienor. Yeah. So he knows he needs to get to them, but he doesn't know where they are, and so that's why he's retracing the steps, and he's finding Meme, and he's going to Nargothrond, and he's yelling at people in Doriath. He's really trying to find his kids. Oh,
right.
That would be awful.
Horrible.
You don't have to make that decision tonight.
No, we don't.
No,
We don't.
But it's on the table of things.
Here's the thing that I want to keep coming back to, though. Again, because this is what I see as the biggest problem. Without Tuor, this is complicated but not an unsolvable problem, right?
Right.
Tuor is the problem. So let me go back and redo seasons 8, 9, and 10 just on the Tuor story. What we're saying is we go from Tuor's childhood through Vinyamar only in one season 8.
Correct.
We do from departure from Vinyamar with Veronwe through marriage with Idril.
Is that season 8?
That's season 8. The first one is season 8.
So in terms of like thinking about their stories lining up, Túrin gets Nargothrond destroyed at roughly the kind of, at least narratively at the same time Tuor is arriving in Vinyamar.
Correct.
Exactly.
Essentially,
yeah.
That's pretty good. I like that.
Yeah,
it is. Me too. Again, my only problem is there's not much Tuor in season 8. There's less Tuor in season 9 because all he does is one thing. He gets two things. He gets to Gondolin and warns Turgon, and then marries his daughter. That's it. That's all he does in season 9.
It's worse than that. I think that you have to give, because like really he shows up and then marries his daughter. Like that's the climax of the season, is that he gets married. That's a thing that happens during the following season, honestly, because then you
don't
get
even
to
want to get him married in this season.
No, because you get to have like actual dramatic tension, and you get to tell the story with Miglin as he's he's slipping further and further off the deep end, right? The way that this gets mitigated is Tuor has to do things on the way. So the reality is that we're just gonna have to make some stuff up,
right? Because you're literally talking about one scene for Tuor in season 9, like
so we need
it's a big
voyage of Tuor and Veronwe.
Veronwe, right? So we need like a buddy cop sequence with Veronwe.
Right. We need like the adventures of Hercules, essentially.
Wild hijinks as they go across Beleriand towards the
occupied Beleriand.
Right. But right. There's obstacles. Okay. So all right. Not much. So even less than I was saying. Then season 10 would more or less begin with the marriage of Tuor and Idril, or at least the significant intro. Anyway, like we're gonna do Tuor and Idril, or like the Tuor Idril Miglin creepy love triangle, and wedding, and then and Eärendil, and then Fall of Gondolin. That by itself, that's better for season 10 at the expense of season 9. Again, Tuor's almost not in season 9. Again, unless
but the reality is that once he gets to Gondolin, that's when it starts getting really hard, because you can't make anything up for that. Whereas as long as he's en route, as long as he's traveling, it's not that hard to find stuff for him to do.
And the audience is okay with a character appearing in one episode in a season to remember who they are.
Right.
So if we have Tuor meeting Veronwe, one adventure on the road, and then the arrival in Gondolin over 3 episodes, we've still kept up with Tuor for that season. The season's not about him, but we still know who he is. So it's better than having a Túrin story, a Tuor story, a Dior story.
Right. It would be a shamelessly filler kind of season for Tuor, or placeholder season is what I mean. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
But that's what happens when you make Túrin 2 seasons, and I'm fine with that. I don't want to shortchange Túrin by shoving him all into one season because we don't have enough other things to do.
Hey,
but if we need other things to do, we have now the Wanderings of Húrin that are apparently happening in season 9. We might be able to
borrow some of that for Tuor.
Yes. Yeah, something from the Wanderings of Húrin might be a Tuor adventure.
Some of especially the early stuff with the Easterlings in Dorloman. Right, would be easy
because he has to go through that general vicinity, not right there, but it's close.
Though he has to get there after Brada's dead.
There's still,
there's room.
Well, I was worried that if we did Túrin all in one season, that we were going to have Glaurung running things in Dorloman in order to make him significant. Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yes. I like G.D. Tarian's suggestion of we could also include the epic sequence of Idril digging a tunnel in season 9 too.
We've had a lot of epic tunnel digging in this series. I don't know what you're talking about.
The tunnel doesn't show up till season 10.
Why?
Because Turgon rejecting Tuor's message
is
the end of season 9. Therefore, that's when the tunnel starts.
We can't end with tunnel making? We can't have him reject earlier in the season?
We could do it a little earlier, but because I mean, if Tuor's not a main character, we don't need his story to end in the final episode.
No, I'm just
it can be earlier.
Just thinking
okay.
Seems like a climax to me. I mean, it's
okay.
It's like, let's end with the big dig. Like, that's what we do.
Okay.
I mean, it's good. No, but
you are from New England, yes.
Or just spotlighting. It would mean spotlighting Idril, basically.
Yes.
At the sort of ending with her.
We could include something with Idril's response to contrast it with Turgon's response, right?
Yeah.
It would still be the same story of
yeah.
Idril's response to Ulmo's message, and that predates their romance, but whatever.
Right, exactly. No, yes, David Michael, it is certainly true that Idril's "I have a bad feeling about this" is after she gets married in the text. Yeah,
But we've definitely already started her down that road because of her aunt. Aradhil.
Yes, exactly. And so connecting backwards to that would be another excuse to make. So there would be something to be gained by spotlighting Idril's role as anticipator of and diverter of disaster, and have that be detached from her marriage to like, if we establish her as the visionary, the one person in Gondolin who's getting it right, and then have her marry Tuor, I think there could be something accomplished there.
Yeah, I think that can work.
Build her up sort of more.
Okay.
So
our secondary storyline for season 10 is not Tuor. He's a third tier story. It's going to be whatever we do with Hurin and Doriath.
Yep.
That's going to be our main B plot through that season.
Yep.
And definitely there'll be some choices to be made there.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't be doing the death of Thingol before the death of Turin, would we?
Say that again.
No.
We wouldn't be doing the death of Thingol before the death of Turin.
No.
Okay. We would just be doing the Hurin and the Naglamir thing.
Just enough to get it started. Yeah.
Right. So we
just need
kill
a little
Thingol
jump
at the
start.
beginning of the next season. So we'll have death of Thingol, Gondolin stuff, fall of Gondolin, Dior, death of Dior. So we'll kill a lot lot
Well, that goes to that.
In the season, in the Silmarillion. I know
we're about to do that.
We were doing that anyway.
People are usually like, "Oh no, Turin! It's such a depressing story. Everybody dies," and we're like, "Don't worry, we're gonna follow it up with a season in which we kill
we're gonna
everybody
make it
else.
Worse.
We're gonna make it worse." Yeah, agreed. No, that's so. I was gonna say that Christopher Tolkien, in editing the Silmarillion, he decided to skip the wanderings of Hurin, but he did so half-heartedly, right? We're going to skip the wandering of Turin's with the wandering of Hurin with prejudice, right? I mean, we're just it's like there's going to be 5 minutes that Hurin's going to have to wander.
It's no wonder that Hurin decides to take an extremely long swim after this.
That's it. No, it will make much more sense. Okay, so I have a suggestion, and yes, Dear Odd Kerr is exactly correct that if our audience makes it through season 7, they'll be fine as far as mortality.
That is true. We are going to have a high mortality rate in every season for the rest of the first season.
Yes, it's really. Let's
kill them all.
Let's kill them all. So, well then one other thing then, Mary. What if we now again and let me just. I'm addressing you with this because I'm tampering with one of your pairings, and that is the second kinslaying and the fall of Gondolin. Because as you were saying before, that does squeeze a lot there, right? We have to do multiple whole things. Like the downfall of Thingol, plus the rise and immediate fall of Dior as well, right? Which is possible, but it's it's
right. So if we're gonna be dealing with the death of Thingol in that season, and we want to push back the death of Dior till later, it's okay to end with the fall of Gondolin. And then in the next season, you'll get some time with Tuor, Idril, and Eärendil wandering and forming havens, Dior continuing to be the ruler. And then we can do some kinslaying back to back with the last two kinslayings.
Get some rapid fire kinslaying. Totally agree. That's just what I was thinking. Because indeed, we can shift a couple of these things through, right? So one of the things that this also conceivably permits, and again, I know this is the departure from the book sequence, but we could even get some voyages of Eärendil before Elwyn comes.
Okay, yeah.
Theoretically. So we really establish them at the Havens.
When they meet.
Yeah.
Right.
That solves the pediatric marriage problem. So, yes, by having him there and doing his voyages and stuff, and so that he is clearly the he's established as the Lord of the Havens before.
We wouldn't want to have a taboo marriage in this story, would we?
Please, we have standards, okay? Like, we don't want to creep anybody out with creepy marriages. Yeah.
Okay.
I agree with exactly what John the Left just said. Eärendil has to be the man, right?
Yes.
We can establish Eärendil as a big deal.
Right. If we're gonna
the man who is not very man at all, in fact, very much.
Right. There's a very
more
small
of a star,
percentage of
actually.
human. Yes. Yeah.
But if we're gonna choose which stories to focus on and really spend more time on, obviously Eärendil is the one that would be a shame to shortchange.
Totally.
So while I don't mind Tuor being on the back burner for a season while he's doing just a little bit of his story, and then having like a big deal with Gondolin in the next season, I would be disappointed if we somehow shifted the Voyages of Eärendil into one episode of him sailing around and doing a little adventure thing, and that's it. That's all we ever see of it.
Exactly.
And I understand that a full season of the Voyages of Eärendil might be overdoing it.
Right.
But
though in our defense, it would be far less than Tolkien projected in the Book of Lost Tales.
Didn't he want to have 6 books?
4 volumes of 4 to 6 volumes of the Voyages of Eärendil. Yes.
Exactly. So I'm fine with an Imram of the Voyages of Eärendil, but at some point we're going to have to get to the War of Wrath.
Oh yeah.
And
so, but I'm not. This is what was going to be my other suggestion, by the way. I'm ready to bump the voyage to Valinor, if not also the third kinslaying, into season 12.
Okay. Personally, I think 12 is a much nicer number of seasons for the First Age than 11.
I wonder why you say that. Sorry, just kidding. It's
it's very elven.
Very elvish, yeah. Elvish. Yeah. The elves count in base 12 for listeners who aren't following.
Oh,
yes.
I thought that made perfect sense.
It did, Marie. I'm just translating from Marie Prosser Tolkien knowledge to general listener Tolkien knowledge. Yes, elves count in base 12. So yes, it would. Yes, I agree. 12.
So
12
let's put the
excellent.
War of Wrath in season 12.
In season 12. Totally agree.
It's too bad we can't squeeze it into 13 so that we can have 13 episode seasons that encompass the first. That would be kind of cool.
There's a certain attraction there. Yeah, there is.
Well, let's plan on 12, and if we need an extra one.
I'm sure once we get there, we'll find a way if we need to.
We may. I mean, we can always add another season of the Voyages of Eärendil if we need to. We have infinite theoretical material to draw upon.
The last season, then, we're hoping for some Voyages of Eärendil.
Yeah.
Third kinslaying, and his arrival in Valinor, and the entire War of Wrath, and then the aftermath of the War of Wrath that sets up for the Second Age.
You mean we're chucking Silmarils places and stuff?
Chucking some Silmarils, Sauron trying to repent.
No, see, that's next season. I don't think we do Sauron repenting.
Okay, Morgoth getting shoved into the void.
Yeah, we can shove Morgoth into the void.
I feel like
if you don't,
Yeah.
You need to end.
We need some first stage closure there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like we need Morgoth in the void.
Right.
Please,
Right.
Let's not leave him laying around.
Yeah. No. Yeah. We push Morgoth through the hatch, but again, that's not like it's. And also, and like, what do we know of the? We literally know one sequence of the War of Wrath.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like there's less than one episode's worth
Calagon.
of War of Wrath in the book.
We're
just told it lasts for a long time, but we know nothing about it, or almost nothing about it.
I was just saying this in the chat that other than the moment that you're talking about when Arendelle shows up, it's not really that compelling story-wise. It might be really interesting to look at, but we don't know anybody there. Maybe
he invests
Finarfin.
Almost nothing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, you're right. We don't.
Ingwe's son.
Even our story, where we've invested so much more and so many more minor characters, will have very few people participating in the War of Wrath that any of our viewers care about.
Question mark. If you're an elf who lives in Beleriand, who's now like exiled to the Isle of Balor on account of Beleriand being taken over by Morgoth, do you participate in the War of Wrath? And if the host of Valinor is like, no, we don't want you, we're good, do you sneak in anyway and join because you're like, young Elrond and you really want to be there? And it turns out he's definitely seen those hosts because he says he saw it with his own eyes.
But he can have seen it after the war is over, though.
He didn't specify, but he did say that he had seen the host that attacked Thangorodrim, and that suggests that he was there.
I think there is...
Doesn't mean he had to be. The point is...
not to like about young Elrond stowing away with the forces of Valinor in the War of Wrath.
I'm just saying,
himself?
If we need a character that the audience is going to know and care about to see the War of Wrath through their viewpoint, I suggest Elrond and Elros. They're there.
Can somebody carry him under their cloak into the battle? I'm ready. I'm down.
And Elros could do something significant, which is why he becomes the king of the Númenóreans.
Yep.
Sure.
Yep.
Like we can create some more of Wrath stories, but we do have to create them because Tolkien didn't write them.
Exactly, and which is fine, and I'm not afraid of that. But it's another reason why I'm not feeling like we need tons and tons of infinite room. If we stretch the War of Wrath out to 3 episodes, that would be a lot.
Right. I would be shocked if the War of Unnumbered Tears lasts more than 3 episodes. We might get into the opening salvos, like the 4th from the last episode, but that's about it.
Yeah. No, we'll have. So I think there'll be plenty of time for, even if we wanted to start season 12 with the third kinslaying, we could do that. I think third kinslaying, voyage to Valinor, arrival in Valinor, judgment of the Valar, arrival of the host, War of Wrath for a few episodes, shove Morgoth through the hatch and chuck the Silmarils. Like, I think there's plenty of time in a season to do all those things.
Right. And that would leave Vianwe still in Beleriand, or what's left of Beleriand, and that we could start into the Second Age with Sauron showing up and being like, "Hey, pardon me."
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Right.
We start with Sauron's repentance at the beginning of the next season as the intro to the Second Age. Absolutely.
Okay.
And this also, by the way, frames, if we did the third kinslaying at the beginning of season 12, it then frames season 12 with Maedhros and Magor.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm obviously not opposed to that.
I thought you might like that.
Although Jeremy in the chat suggests having the frame story POV be Elrond while the main story POV also be Elrond, which would be insane. I really love that.
Yeah. So actually, I am gonna push back on making Maedhros the thing. Shockingly, I know.
I'm not suggesting Maedhros is the through line character.
No, but the bookends.
The bookends. Yeah,
yeah.
Exactly.
And like I said, I'm obviously not changing that. What I'm suggesting, though, is that with each of these seasons, we need to have a mortal character who is the focus. And with season 7, because we had Beren in season 6, obviously, we've got Hurin and Huor in season 7, but mostly Hurin. We're moving into Turn for the next 2 seasons after that, it looks like. Whether Tuor or Dior is more important in certain seasons. We can sort out now. I'm a little lost, but
Right.
the last season, it's really Elrond and Elros, not Maedhros and Maglor. Like their story's over, and
Agreed.
they
Yeah.
don't know it yet, but they're on their way out. So
Yeah.
the story
And-
we're going to tell is going to be the story of Elrond and Elros.
Right. Right.
Just saying.
Totally.
Oh, and
Totally.
Erendil and Elwing, I am counting as mortals because they were born that way. I realize they don't quite end up that way.
Right. Right. And needless to say, by the way, I think that we totally lean into the stuff that gets kind of left out. But the idea that they're humans as well at the Havens of Sirion, right? And the being able to play on the human cultures there and the elf cultures there and Elrond and Elros, and there's a lot more that we can do to make their choices make sense. Again, I'm not saying they're illogical in the book, but they're not compelling, right? Like, why does Elros choose humans? Why does Elrond choose elves? We don't really know, like,
Right.
what their experiences were that led them to do that. We're going to have the opportunity to build that a little bit, which will be a lot of fun.
Yeah. And another character who should play a prominent role in that final season would be Círdan, who has been on the periphery for the last 2 seasons.
Yes.
He played a somewhat significant role in season 4.
Season 4, yep.
But we're going to have to bring him in more and more at the end.
Yep.
And show how he's not quite an Erendil character as far as fate goes, but he still has that prophetic, I am here for a purpose
Yes.
thing that is carrying him through this age, unlike anyone else who it's all gonna die.
Yeah. Yeah.
What does a human soldier even do during the War of Wrath? The War of Wrath is not the War of the Powers from the beginning of the First Age. We're told, in fact, that entire armies of humans who I guess were all like in hiding in the wilderness, trying to avoid getting orked. Come out
Also,
of the
how long
woodwork.
does the War of Wrath take place?
In 50 years.
That's what I'm saying. They could have like bred
Yeah.
a new army of humans
right.
during the
Yeah.
course of the war.
Hey,
The final battle, like an entire new generation.
Exactly, like the
Hundreds of
grandkids of
thousands of
the
people.
soldiers who started the war. Yeah.
to be
yeah.
fair, Tolkien's timelines for the end of the First Age are extremely muddy.
Very
and
muddy. Yeah.
Therefore, it's which version are you going with? And
Of course.
it's
Of course.
yeah. So there's you can make it 50 years. You can make it a lot less than that, and you can,
You can make it more.
I guess,
Yeah.
justify anything at this point.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we can decide. But if we need human characters to stay alive for more than one season, we can do that for a lot of this. The set years are that the Beren and Luthien story we've taken through about year 462, so it ends a few years earlier in our version on account of some things that were skipped, and then the Unnumbered Tears is 472. So Túrin's story is being crafted around the 472 date for that battle. Same with Tuor. And then, at what year does Thingol die? At what year does Gondolin fall? Well, we can talk about that when we get there. But I believe the War of Wrath stuff isn't supposed to go much past like 526 or something like that. The First Age isn't that long.
Well, it makes, I mean, the way that it accelerates towards the end, it's not like we want to add another couple centuries or something. So
right. No. So we can keep the humans alive as we need them, or the dwarves, or what have you.
Okay. So all right. So let's see if we can sum up more or less where we are. There's still some muddiness in the middle.
Good luck.
But I think it's perfectly appropriate that the muddiness is around the fall of Doriath, because that's the muddiest part of Tolkien's text anyway. So, okay. Oh, and by the way, P.S., even before I do the summary, Marie, I am totally down. I would love to do the number one after discussing our way through the end of the War of the Jewels in Mythgard Academy. I am pumped up to get rid of Beren and the dwarves. I want the Feanorians back. I want the Feanorians to be ambushing the dwarves coming out of... I love that version of the story. It's so much better. Like the Feanorians, the way that Tolkien was shifting to that in order to build up to the second kinslaying, so that the second kinslaying doesn't just come out of nowhere. But we have, like, now that Luthien doesn't have the Silmaril anymore, the Feanorians are on the job, right? And their very first move is to ambush the dwarf because they're like, problem solved. The dwarves already killed Thingol for us and took the Silmaril out. Now we just have to kill dwarves, take the Silmaril from them. No elf, no kin need be slain in this transaction, right? What a golden opportunity. And then it doesn't work out and they're like, dang it. And then that's what like leads to the precipitation of the... Anyway, I love that. It's such a great logical story. We lose Beren and Treebeard, I know, but we can still think about, we don't have to, we can think about integrating Treebeard. That's the major loss.
Yeah, we can put Beren and Treebeard someplace else.
Yeah, we can, yeah.
Right. So if we make that choice, then we would have to decide how we want to end the Beren and Luthien story.
Yes.
And obviously the last we've seen of them, they're happily married off in Tolgalen, not caring about what's happening in the rest of Beleriand. So
yeah,
if they stay there, that's kind of fine. Like we did tell the story to that point.
Fairly gentle denouement is the I mean
right.
that's the
and
other.
By the way, having the no, they don't have the Silmaril. I was gonna say having the Silmaril in a secure, undisclosed location seems like
they
a move
do for a while, yeah.
But they that doesn't happen yet. Yeah.
So we'll have to sort out what the final note we'll want to have for Beren and Luthien, because we do probably want a final note with Dior in his story.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Losing his parents is part of his story. So, as with many Tolkien characters,
yes.
So we'll have to sort that out. But we probably can find an ending there if we need to.
Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to make a note that I
good
really
to know
want to
that's something you want to incorporate.
Yeah, I think I think it's fun. Okay. But more Feanorians, right? Who says no?
Not me.
I figured I was on a good angle there. Okay.
Yeah, easy sell.
Okay. All right. So let's see if we can do it. Season 7 is the easy one. We start with Húrin and Huor, and we end with unnumbered tears. The Húrin being the primary through line of the season. Season 8, we do the Tuor story from his childhood to his arrival in Vinyamar. We do the Túrin story from his childhood, especially in his arrival in Doriath, his childhood in Doriath, all the way down through the arrival of Glaurung in Nargothrond and the downfall of the destruction of Nargothrond. So that with that motif of Túrin making his worst choices. So Túrin is making his worst choices. Tuor is, by contrast, making good choices, heading off and finding his destiny, meeting Ulmo at the same time that Túrin's doom is coming upon him.
At the same time, Túrin is meeting Glaurung.
Exactly, yeah.
That
Marvelous.
Juxtaposition,
that's nice.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
That's
I
nice.
love that.
Yeah.
And we're also, of course, we're beginning the season probably with Húrin's captivity, so that we set up the curse there at the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, season 9.
It's in there somewhere. Yeah.
It's in there somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Season 9, we get Tuor is setting off with Varanwe on what may be a relatively roundabout trip to Gondolin. But in any case, he's going to get to Gondolin. He's going to deliver his message. His message can be deliberated. Turgon can decide that he's not going to do anything with it. And Idril can build a tunnel. Right. So we could... Maybe that's starting to sound like we could flesh that out into appearing, stretching over 5 episodes or so.
Yeah.
We're getting there. Okay.
At least 3.
Right, at least 3. Meanwhile, Túrin is heading out, not rescuing Finduilas, goes up, kills Brada, comes back, goes to Brethil. So we have the rest of the Túrin story, right? So we end season 9 with the death of Túrin, and Húrin, who has been released, arriving just a moment too late. Oh, that's so horrible. I can't even. But okay, that's happening in season 9. We've accelerated things, but we've gotten Húrin, but we're not overlapping them. So nothing has happened with the Nauglamir. Nothing's happened with Thingol yet. We've got.
He might have ordered the Silmaril Nauglamir set.
No, because he wouldn't have the. He would have the Silmaril, but not the Nauglamir yet. If Húrin's going to bring it to him still.
Well, he could have done it on the way. Like he could still have. We could talk about this later.
Yeah,
it could still happen.
I got you. Oh, I'm tracking.
There's choices to be made there, but by releasing him early, that possibility is now on the table.
Right.
And the
He
only
runs
thing we're
down to
going to hold off
Nargothrond,
on,
and
right?
that's why he doesn't get
if
there in
he's
time.
going to all the
Gotcha.
places, he may hit
Gotcha.
Nargothrond before Doriath.
Yep.
Brethel.
And yeah.
Oh, Nargothrond, Doriath, Brethel. Yeah.
Yes, that could be the order.
Or even Nargothrond, Brethel, Doriath is the one that I would lean towards. Like he's going to try to rescue Túrin, right? And he thinks he's in Nargothrond, and then he finds out he's not in Nargothrond, and then he gets to Brethel just in time for Túrin to die. At which point he's ticked off, and he's got the Nauglamir in his back pocket that whole time, and he goes straight to Doriath from like.
Well, he might not
arrows.
know that Túrin is in Brethel, and he might go to Nargothrond and find out, well, we don't know where he is. We think he might be in Brethel. Like that information could be relayed to him.
To Doriath. Yeah, no, he could.
Yeah, whatever. We can send him where he wants.
We can figure that out.
Yeah,
point is,
we can figure that out.
Thingol can get that Nauglamir either in this season or the next one, depending on how we choose to do it.
Yeah.
Now that we've released her in early.
Now that we've released her in early, it's happening. It sounds like it's happening now. That's it. And it's all, and the great thing is that it's all Nick's fault, not my fault. So I'm loving this. Okay.
Yes.
Season 10. Then.
Wait. I got a quick season 9 question. This can also be punted. Since we're making up stuff for Tuor and fleshing out his story, do we think we can contrive a cameo appearance of Tuor in Túrin's story?
Yes.
Like just like a brief moment where they're like fighting back to back, working together.
Not like that, but the moment at the pools of Ivren. They both pass at they cross paths at the pools of Ivren, and that will be an important point to establish for the audience what's happening where and when.
But so you have a conversation.
You're wanting to give them like stuff
more than that,
an interaction.
Oh, it would be kind of cool for them to have an interaction, but they never
don't know
tell each other who they are.
Yeah, they don't exchange names.
Yeah.
Which sets up Túrin's bad habit of not exchanging names.
That's right.
One of the take-home lessons is wear a name tag. Just wear a name tag. How hard is it? Right?
With all of your names on it.
All
every
of
single
your names. It can be a long name tag. It might have to unfold, right? You might need a retractable name tag.
Like the old wallets with all the pictures of all your kids.
Exactly.
He could give him one of his
going by at that point, because this is after the fall of Nargothrond. So is he Turambar yet?
It's one of his bad names, right?
Is he Nathan still? The wronged? I forget what name he's going by.
No, Nathan is
Agarwain, son of Umarth at this point?
Yeah,
or
that was
something.
That
maybe?
was okay.
That was in Nargothrond, I know, but
so I'm like, I forget what. How does he introduce himself in Dorloman? I forget, but
I don't think he does.
Like it would be. You could actually make like as long as something else is happening, as long as something else is happening somewhere else. You could do an entire episode where it's just Tuor and Túrin shooting the breeze at the pools of Ivren. You could.
Except that Túrin's kind of
he has places to go and
at
things
the time
to do.
and distraught, so he's not going to just like kick back for that.
But
we could do a much more extended interaction, like
a therapy session.
He could use
and he could give one of his names, but not because the whole point is he was always trying to conceal himself. He's always trying to hide who he really is. So if he gives a name, pick which one we want to use, but Tuor won't figure out who it is.
You should give one of his bad self-fulfilling prophecy names for sure.
But the thing is, I don't. And
Hur should have like an interesting reaction to that.
Tuor doesn't reveal his name because he's nobody.
Yeah.
Right.
Why would anybody care what his name
grew up with no family, like an orphan in the wilderness, right?
Or if he could even call himself a son of Anael if he wanted,
right?
Which wouldn't mean anything to Túrin either. Like they could both give a name and be like, don't know who that guy is.
Right, exactly.
And it would be weird.
I mean, if I ran into Túrin in the woods, I probably wouldn't give him my real name either.
That's very fair.
It's true. Maybe he already has a grudge against you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But yes,
I think even if we did, I think like even inserting a respite for Túrin before shit really hits the fan could be nice.
Right.
But it would give like a nice, it would be like a, I'm sure it would be satisfying because it's like wish fulfilling for readers, but also I think it could have a nice like narrative sort of purpose of like kind of a moment of like near miss. This thing could have gone a different direction, maybe. What if these guys teamed up?
But Dave, you're overlooking his like time of domestic bliss in Brethil. He's got a nice happy interlude there.
You're right. He is gonna have a nice one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. All right. So, but we get to the end of the season, right? Death of Túrin, showing up of Húrin, and Idril's building a tunnel, right? And Turgon has made his fateful decision to not to, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Season 10 then is going to be one thread of season 10 is going to be the romance, marriage, and staving off of Maegwyn's creepy advances, which then culminates in the birth of Eärendil and then the fall of, and the betrayal of Maegwyn, the fall of Gondolin. So we got that one clear thread in season 10. We then get the hurling of the Nauglamir at Thingol, the forging of the new and improved Nauglamir, the death of Thingol.
You call it the new and improved Silmaril. It'll make Feanor mad.
That's why I didn't say that. I'm no fool.
That's pretty much calling down the curse on yourself.
Exactly. Like, Magor's going to be showing up from somewhere at some point here, right? It's going to,
He's probably still alive.
Exactly. He's probably listening. So,
Maglor is a listener to this podcast.
Right. Yeah. Now have to figure who in the chat is actually Maglor. But anyway, so, okay. We casually talked about bumping the second kinslaying, but now I'm not sure where are we ending with the death of Thingol, or we end with the Feanorians ambushing the dwarves?
Right. So the death of Thingol would not be the end of the season. It would be something that happens during the season.
How about the death of Beren and Luthien?
Mm-hmm. It could. I mean,
like the Silmaril being delivered to Dior.
Right. So, well, except if they don't have it in our version, I don't know how we're handling.
We have to figure that out.
Yeah. So the point is, we're going to kill Thingol before the end of the season, and then deal with some aftermath with dealing with those dwarves, and the fall of Gondolin could happen after that, so that preserves Gondolin still existing after Thingol is dead from the original, right?
Right. Yep.
The whole Gondolin is the last. Yeah. So that way, if we shift it around and have some other stuff happen in Doriath, we could bring Dior to Doriath before the end. Like we could do something. I don't know exactly how we're going to end the storyline though, because we have a lot of choices to make about the Nauglamir storyline as to what is even happening. As you brought up, who's attacking those dwarves?
So true.
Well, not necessarily the published version.
Well, yeah, exactly. The published version, which Christopher apologizes for in the War of the Jewels. Exactly. Yeah. That's it. Okay, so little unclear exactly, and that also means, by the way, that it's therefore a little bit unclear what exactly we're kind of paralleling with the fall of, what's happening at the same time as the fall of Gondolin.
Right. Is it Dior arriving in Doriath? Is he already king of Doriath, and we're bringing him the Silmaril news that his parents have died? Like, there's different.
Is it even the bringing of the Silmaril to Luthien, like the putting of the Silmaril on Luthien or something like that?
Right.
That's also a possibility.
Right, because that would be her doom.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So we could somewhere around there is where that plot line ends at the end of season 10, along with the fall of Gondolin. By the way, Glorfindel, is he dying in season 10 or season 11?
Right. So you wanted
into the
more.
Tunnel? Where does the fall of Gondolin end? Is what I'm saying.
You wanted more story with the founding.
I especially wanted it when I thought we needed it to balance, right? But if we're stretching enough, I think we can make it work.
I think we kill Glorfindel in the season with the fall of Gondolin simply because the attack of the Balrogs on the refugees feels like it's part of the same story.
Yeah.
I don't think we end the fall of Gondolin until they're away in the clear.
Okay. Right.
That's how I feel about that story.
Right. Well, the difference that it makes is, where do we want to end it? Is the end of the fall of Gondolin like that plot line? Is it Gondolin in flames and alas, Gondolin is fallen? Or is it, but the refugees have escaped, right? I mean, is it hope for the future and young Eärendil being carried on Tuor's
young
shoulders as they
Eärendil is
escape.
a character in that storyline, and therefore, of course, hope for the future is the note you end on, because that's who he is.
Right.
You cannot tell the story of the fall of Gondolin and not
Mr.
have
Hope for the future.
And yet hope for the future has survived because Eärendil lives. Yeah.
Yep.
Like
agreed.
That's why I don't want to separate it.
Agreed. No, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect. In which case, in the beginning of season 11, the Gondolindrium refugees are free agents. They finished their story, so we can bring them. We can have them. We can focus them on bringing the havens of Sirion, right, and the establishment of the havens, which is kind of a bigger deal. It's not just a purely geographical movement, right? We have here, we bring Círdan in. We need Gil-galad. We got to figure out what Gil-galad is up to.
All the refugees are coming to this point now because we've just destroyed.
Well, wait.
Nargothrond and Gondolin.
Doriath is still up though.
Doriath is still up.
Yeah, Doriath is still
that'll
up.
It'll be the havens and Doriath with Dior.
Yep.
Until
and we can. Yeah, now we're ending up with not so much
in this season
Doriath story left because yeah,
this season is now the havens and the second kinslaying
exactly,
and
that's what I was going to say.
That's like a whole season.
Well, that's why I was suggesting we include some Voyages of Eärendil here.
That we can have.
We can postpone Elwing's arrival for almost as long as we want.
Right. She can be older when she gets there.
I was going to say, which would conveniently give her time to grow to adulthood as well, which would be convenient. So yeah.
I mean, unless we really want her to be a kid during the kinslaying, like if we want the story to be that she is a child who's like whisked away during the kinslaying. But if that's not important, then I'm fine with her
having
being
her
older.
arrive at the havens. I mean, unless we're going to do a You and Me in the Cottage of Lost play, Eärendil and Elwing, playing together as children and growing up to fall in love and get married story. I would rather she not show up. We certainly don't want her showing up as a kid when Eärendil's full grown.
Right. So if you're going to do him doing voyages, I'm thinking let's keep her in Doriath until
keep her
she's grown
occupied.
As well.
Yeah.
And her brothers can be significantly younger.
What?
So her brothers can be younger, so we can still have children in the sack of Doriath.
Yeah.
Who are going to have horrible ends.
Yes.
Probably.
Yes. Oh, we still have. Yeah. I mean, we have one of the classic opportunities to have children coming to horrible ends if we want them. So yes, that's easy. But yeah, this also gives us an opportunity, frankly, I would kind of like to take a minute there are two elements of this story that I think need some serious expansion, right? One of which is Dior's kingdom. What's that like? Right. Yeah. What is Doriath Mark II actually like? Right. What are the differences? Just flat Dior as a character. I mean, he's an almost a non-entity in the Silmarillion as far as what we know about him. We get very little. I'd like to lean into Dior as a character. I'd like to be able to do some compare and contrast. I mean, heck, what is like Doriath without the girdle of Melian? There are all kinds of things that we need that we can do. But then also at the same time, the other thing that we do is build up the Feanorian story.
I was going to say the parallel story to Doriath without the girdle is So the Oath, and that can be in this season. And if we've introduced them with the dwarves at the end of the previous season, that goes into it.
Exactly.
The other thing is that part of the Eärendil storyline is he's trying to reach Valinor.
Yes.
And in this season, he can have voyages and be unsuccessful at that. So we can set that up as a goal. He's following in Varanwe's footsteps. Varanwe was not successful. Tuor has not been successful. Eärendil is not successful. And then if we open up the next season with the second kinslaying and bring the refugees down and marry them and get that whole thing ready for the third kinslaying.
Yes.
Then
hey, wait a second. This means that we actually I'm not sure this will work because this means we have a season that ends happily.
We're going to end it with the second kinslaying.
Oh, good. Yeah, you're right. Okay. No,
that doesn't sound right.
That's
But-
good. Yeah.
But that is the arrival of Elwing. So okay, sorry. So yeah, I guess we're in
There's
season.
still a resolution, a more
Yeah,
positive.
it's season.
Hey,
We're in season 11 now, right?
Season
So-
one
11.
ended happily, right?
No. I just mean from 7 on. Right?
Yeah, this
I mean,
whole story.
Oh,
Like we're
no.
at Battle of Unnumbered Tears, Fall of Nargothrond, rather, Death of Thingol, Fall of Gondolin, Second Kinslaying, War of Wrath is how we're ending the final season. So yeah,
Right.
That's good.
So
That's good.
so we've
Works.
got what looks like a couple of bad things: the second and the third kinslayings back
Yeah.
to back, more or less, at the end of season 11 and the beginning of 12.
Yeah.
But the aftermath of the third kinslaying is that Arendelle is successful in his voyage. So if season 11 is him trying to make that voyage and failing, now there's a very clear silver lining to the third kinslaying,
Right.
which the part where Elwing turns into a bird and flies away, like clearly we've got some involvement from the Valar at this point, at the very least, if not a Luvatar, because like this is the level of
the whole bird
wait a
thing
minute,
is-
what just
yeah.
happened here?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, like that's not
Mhm.
usually how.
It's not normal behavior.
Right.
Yes.
So having that as an indication of, oh, now we're into the end game of the whole point of everything, and that
Yes.
Arendelle is the special guy. I feel like we need season 11 to set that up.
Yep.
So I'm in favor of not just founding of the Havens, but
Voyages.
founding of the, and Círdan trying to fulfill his role
Yes.
of
Yes.
reach Valinor, reach the West. That was his whole deal: is I'm going to build ships that can reach the West, and he keeps building
Yeah.
these ships that nobody gets there. So,
Exactly.
like,
No, that's what I like. Yeah, I
Yeah.
like. That's the other thing I want to do about the establishment of the Havens. Exactly that. That rather than merely depicting this as the surviving elves are being driven to the last and smallest bit of land, that's left to them. It's not just that, right? They've gone. This is a positive step, right? And it's not merely by default. There's nowhere else. There's a bunch of other places they could go if they just wanted to run away, right? But going to the Havens of Sirion is not running away. It's a plan, right? And the
Right.
plan is to join with Círdan. Círdan becomes the centerpiece then.
yes, I want season 11 to have a
Yes.
big Círdan focus.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that's good.
While
I think-
still keeping to our mortal characters of Dior and Arendelle.
For sure. Yep. No, that's important. And of course we have to figure out what exactly Gil-galad's perspective is. Where is he, by the way? Like,
The last time we saw him,
yeah.
he was Fingon's ambassador to Doria.
On his awkward
Right.
ambassadorial
So
mission.
he
Yeah.
managed to have such tasks as reading out Celegorm's letter asking for Luthien's hand
Right.
in marriage
Right.
to the King of Doriath.
Yes.
So it's been going great for him.
Worst ambassadorial job ever. I mean, like,
right.
worst job to be handed. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's been based in Nargothrond. That was why he was doing that.
Right.
So, but we can move him as necessary. His family is in Nargothrond right now because obviously Ordre's there. So we're going to need to get him out of Nargothrond before the fall.
Yep.
Celebrimbor needs to go with him,
Yep.
and Finduilas stays. So whatever gets him out can't be I think it's getting dangerous, so I should leave.
100%.
And we had come up with a storyline earlier, which we did not end up really using, where while the Feanorians were there, there was some risk to him, so he got sent away, but then we did the whole ambassador thing instead.
Yeah.
No,
the whole, like, let's put Gil-galad in cold storage in case we need him later plot line is not one that I love.
No. So
yeah.
sending him down to the Havens for no reason doesn't fit. However, we are going to have messengers from Ulmo in the form of Gelmer and Arminus show up in Nargothrond during the Turin story. And if we want to do a parallel to Gondolin, Turin can be like, nope, we're good here. Everything's fine. And Ordre's like, so Gil-galad, I'm going to need you to go to the Havens and talk to Círdan because apparently we're about to have a big problem.
Right.
So like he can be sent on a mission instead of sent away to keep him safe.
Sure. Exactly.
And whatever his mission is, does not result in saving Nargothrond, obviously, but maybe he tried and got there too late, or whatever.
Right.
So it's not the build a tunnel thing, but it's the equivalent of build a tunnel, is send Gil-galad to Círdan.
Right. But then we have to answer the complicated question: why is Gil-galad not the leader of the why is he? How does he? Yeah.
He's Orodhra's son.
He's older than
Círdan's...
Eärendil. I mean,
yeah. But I mean, Círdan's around.
Sure.
Why is Círdan not in charge?
Yeah, agreed.
I'm thinking Círdan is in charge.
Right.
No matter
Círdan
who you say is the leader, Círdan
is the one in charge. Right.
Which I think everybody there would defer to Círdan. And if Círdan's like, we have a human settlement here, it would be best to have a human leader. Young Eärendil, you are the leader of these people, yes? Oh, of course. And Eärendil's, I'm doing what you say, man.
Right. And just figuring out where Gil-galad fits in the political constellation at the Havens of Sirion is a bit... Or do we want to get rid of him? We could get rid of him, too. We could send him off. He doesn't have to stay there the whole time.
He can have a mission of some sort, yeah.
Yeah.
So, we do have things to work out. When you said, are there any other long-term storylines? Galadriel and Sauron are the two that we definitely need from a whole cloth. Tolkien didn't do what he would have done if he had worked them into the first age.
Yes.
But everybody at the end of the first age is so lightly sketched. So what's Celebrimbor up to? What's Gil-galad up to?
For sure. Now, these are going to be fun gaps to fill.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. Which is why, but we can't send them all east, but actually we kind of could.
When you said the choice to stay and do something, like send these ships or run away, going east, are you doing something or are you running away? Right. So we could have one character go east with a purpose, probably Galadriel, and we could have someone else go east to run away.
Right.
If we want to. Probably not Gil-galad. He doesn't seem to run away.
I think the Celebrimbor could run away.
Yes. Since we know he ends up in Eregion, how quickly does he get there?
He seems a runaway candidate. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Especially after kinslings start happening again. He has a reason to get out of Dodge.
Yeah. For sure.
Because,
the optics are bad. You don't want to be a Feanorian in the Havens of Sirion at that point, right? I mean, it's awkward.
Right? Yeah.
On the best days, it's awkward.
Yeah, there is a comment that towards the end, everybody who's left in Beleriand who's alive is like a refugee on the Isle of Balar, right?
Yeah.
That's where they all retreat to. The Isle of Balar is large, but only so large.
Right.
And if it's everyone, is that the surviving Feanorians as well? Are they welcome?
It's more uncomfortable than the shores of Lake Mithrim, for crying out loud.
Right, because they have already done the third kinslaying on the Havens of Sirion. The reason everyone's on the Isle of Balar instead of the Havens of Sirion is
having failed to kill you all, we thought we'd move in. Is everybody okay with that? Can we?
So there's some logistics to work out there, and when it says everyone's there, do we mean everyone or just everyone but the Feanorians?
Right.
Did they go somewhere else?
Yeah.
And if so, that might be another runaway option.
Right. Yeah. Oh, it reminds me, Marie, to tell you that we were joking when we were reading Tolkien's comments on the conversation between Eöl and
Curufin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People said that they want to make a T-shirt that says, "Hi, my name is Curufin, and I haven't slain my kin in." In 600 years. Because we were talking about the admirable restraint that he is showing in going way out of his way not to do a kinslaying on Eöl.
He definitely didn't murder Eöl when he totally could have.
He totally could have. He totally wanted to, but he absolutely didn't. So we're thinking, he's gone clean. He still hasn't fallen off the wagon yet.
Yeah, he's going to have to turn in some chips though when we get to the end of
so the kinsling sobriety shirt I thought was kind of fun. Anyway, okay. However, it's super late, but I think we've done well. I think this seems a workable. There's still lots and lots of questions to answer, obviously, and there's still even in the overall shape and thinking of the kind of the balance and the pairings. Some of them work really well, like Vinyamar and Nargothrond. I agree. I really like the Olmo Glaurung pairing. the stuff like the fall of Gondolin, end of season 10. How do we pair that exactly and with what? There'll be, but that's all stuff that I think we can figure out at the time. The overall shape, I think will work, and we get it into 12 seasons. So
we've planned out 6 years of podcasts now.
At least.
You're very
like
optimistic, Dave.
Yeah.
So
let's just say there's a chance that Wally will be you'll be doing college visits with Wally by the time we
as a frame of reference.
Yeah.
We're beginning season 7 today, right?
Yes.
In September of 2023.
Yes.
The beginning of season 5 was March of 2020.
Okay.
So
Good point.
Just
so that's
to let you know what you just signed up for.
That's 3.5 years for 2 seasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're so what you're saying is we're coming in at less than 2 years a season.
Right. That's fine.
Uh-huh. So it's less than 12 years left for us to do this to get to the end of the first stage.
We've planned out the next decade worth of podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
No problem. No, by my estimate, we got 6 seasons left. If we're doing with 3.5 years, then we're looking at 10 and a half years ish.
Yeah.
Will film be done by the time Tolkien's works are in public domain? No. Yes.
Not the Silmarillion. Yes. The Silmarillion won't be in the public domain. They will. For a long time.
Yes, film will be done before Tolkien's works are before the Silmarillion is public domain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is a quirk of the way the Silmarillion was published.
Exactly.
Because I don't think on the cover that it says written by J.R.R. Tolkien anywhere.
I believe that the copyright is attached to Christopher.
Oh, no, it 100% is, but I think it's by publishing it as just edited by Christopher Tolkien rather than edited by Christopher Tolkien, written by J.R.R. Tolkien. I think that's how they managed that.
Yeah.
It'll be a long time. Yeah.
It'll be a long time. That's not bad. It's not bad. We've already done 6 seasons, so we're halfway done. We're halfway there.
That's a different way of putting it.
Yeah.
That's encouraging.
We're
but
halfway there.
When did you first propose some film, Corey?
Well, it was 2014? I think it was 2014. It was in Myth Moot 3, wasn't it?
It was in the.
It was Myth Moot 3, yeah.
It was shortly. It was. Yeah, that's right.
Right after the Battle of the Armies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
So. Yep. So that's how long ago it started.
9 years. It's perfect. Yeah. No. See, exactly.
About how much time we have left, except that the seasons ended up taking longer, not shorter. So, I'd say we have another 10 years of this.
Yep.
Halfway through.
Halfway through. The question is when we're done. Will I have grandchildren older than Nick's kids are now or Dave's kids are now? That's really the question. That's really the question.
What certainly seems to be the direction we're trending in.
Yeah. That's good. I like it. And that'll still leave us plenty of time, needless to say, for the second and third ages. So, yeah.
Yep.
Yes, that's right.
No problem.
Gotta get them. Gotta get those kids going.
Yes,
our children are gonna. We need a transition plan.
Eventually.
I can't wait until we can retire and watch our kids argue about this. It's gonna be great.
Yep.
I'll tune into Twitch every Thursday night. on my brain phone,
Yeah.
Exactly.
By then you'll have a Elon Musk Neuralink chip in your brain. It'll just be broadcast directly in there.
My family would disown me for sure.
But it would be interesting to see how many variations of technology film outlasts. Since 2014 was a while ago.
It
That's
was.
true.
Yes, it was.
I don't know when Zoom started or when Twitch started, but
Well, I know we predate Zoom. I don't know if we predate Twitch. We might.
I don't know. Yeah, I have no idea.
But anyway, in any case, moving forward, our next episode will be coming back and beginning to do some concrete planning for season. We'll begin digging, much more, and we'll try to get a clearer vision of the shape. Do we want to? Are we gonna talk about the? Of course, Dave, we were saying one of the two subplots that we're gonna want to build are what is Sauron doing and what is Galadriel doing, right?
Oh boy.
Yeah. Do we want to have a separate episode on those questions, or do you think, Maria? Well,
that has been my recommendation for a while, to be honest.
Yeah, I think we probably should. There's a lot we have to talk about there with those, because again, we have to think about their whole trajectories, not just what we want them to do in season 7. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll probably work through the overall shape of the rest of it, right, and see if we can figure out a theme. And of course, the other challenge is how to go through the next 6 seasons without having any of the themes of the seasons merely be crushing despair, because I don't think it should be, but it's going to be a temptation. So anyway, we'll figure it out. So that'll be under discussion next time too. And the probable date, I say probable because fall is complicated, and I'm traveling a lot, and I think I'll be around, but it's complicated. So Thursday, October 5th, though, is the projected next. That's just, in fact, 2 weeks from today, at our regular time, 10 p.m. Eastern time. So look forward to digging into. Thanks for this. This has been a really, really fun overview. It's. I feel like we're practically done now. This is.
Yes.
Most of the work of the next 6 seasons is behind us now, so we can just coast to the finish line for the next decade. Yep. Very good. Thanks, everybody. I will say, as always, thanks for listening, and Godspeed. Good night now.